L. Ron Hubbard.
And you find in each and every case, you're finding the phenomenon of entities, communications, spaceships, other planets, locations, beingness in other states, and all of this, and you find this to be a consistent condition. You have fulfilled this definition of the mesh universe.
Friends, welcome back to another episode of SPTV Live here on the Dazed But Not Confused channel. Today we are joined by Mark Turi, who's going to do part 2 of where we left off last time. So it takes people a while to trickle in. YouTube takes their time on sending out the notifications. So we're going to kill a few minutes by doing some house cleaning first, Mark, and then I will introduce you. And we'll get going here into the meat of today's session. But first off, I want to show you what we've done so far with Mark and what we're going to be covering today. So we have, where are we here? So if you go to the homepage, which is right here, and you scroll down, you'll see podcast, SPTV Live. And Mark covered his entire story on Scientology in these videos, starting with how can intelligent people be ensnared by Scientology stupidity. We covered Hollywood and Teal Swan. That's more appropriate. Teal Swan, Christian Science, and culture. And then after we covered his story, we got into other topics. And Mark, we're doing so many. I think we're going to have to create a pod playlist just for you called Turi Tuesdays. So we covered the New Thought and New Age movement with Eckankar. This one was amazing. Eckankar, Agape Spiritual Center, Hare Krishnas, and more. We literally covered like everything in the New Age and New Thought movement. And that brings us to the last one we did, exploring the complicated world of theological stances. And now we're doing the non-theistic stances. And I wanted to, real quick, Mark, while we're waiting for people to come in, I wanted to try out this funny new thing that Mark has created to reward and give a shout out to the people who were kind enough to help out with the channel. And I'm not going to monetize this channel, even though it qualified a while ago. I don't want to run ads and I don't want to charge people for asking questions, but we do have a support the channel page, which people were kind enough to donate to. And I just wanted to give a shout out to the people that helped out recently. And that's Rob, Ava, Sandra Barrett, Goldie, of course, and Carol and Lady Veritas kicked down with 4 frickin' coffees and left a hilarious message. Mimi, Linda Ballard, Apostate Alex, Carrie Christopherson Clark, seen you a lot in the chat, as well as Beachcomber, Kelly, Marilyn, Broken Dishes, just goes on and on. Karen, thank you guys all very much for the support. Much appreciated. Now, Mark, that we have the house cleaning out of the way, could you please introduce yourself to people that might not know kind of your background, a little bit in Scientology, and then briefly what we covered last time and what we'll be covering today? The floor is yours.
Of course, yeah. So my name is Mark Turi, and I was a Scientologist for 3 years. I joined in May of 2005 when I was 22, when I was on vacation in Los Angeles at the time. And I discovered through the L. Ron Hubbard Life Exhibition and the Hollywood Test Center, which was in the middle of May of 2005. And then I stayed in for 3 years until May of 2008. However, my very last year, which was from May 2007 to May 2008, I was on a staff in the Berlin org for 9 months. And then about 2.5 months, I was on staff in the San Francisco Day org. I've shared my story multiple times throughout the years, but honestly, I have to be completely honest with you, only within the past, 2 years or 1 year has there actually been a lot of, more focus on ex-member stories. So like the first time I ever shared my story was 14 years ago with Mark Bunker. But there was really very few outlets back then. So now I've been on Apostate Alex's channel. I've been on Aaron Smith Levin's channel. I've now been on Doug's multiple times. I've also been with Chris Shelton twice on his channel. So anyone also out there with any SPTV channels that want to talk, you can reach out to Doug. You can reach out to me. I'd love to come on and chat. However, I was in for 3 years as a staff member. There's a lot, of course, that I can get into, but let's just put it this way. It was a very horrendous experience being on staff. I was used. There was some physical and emotional abuse that happened through, or at least manipulation and whatnot that happened when I was on staff. And finally, in May 2007, I decided to leave Scientology. And ever since then, I've been out, and I've been again trying to speak and of my story multiple times. I've done protesting in the past. I protested when I lived in Los Angeles in 2009 to 2011. I protested multiple times. I also protested. Last time I protested was in 2013 during the opening of the Cambridge Ideal Org in southwestern Ontario. I happen to be born and raised in Toronto, Canada, but I'm living now in Europe. And I also am a story where after leaving the church, I decided to go back and pursue my education. So I'm right now doing my master's degree. And again, that's to anyone who might be lurking out there who is in Scientology or trying to get out of Scientology. There's a life after. Don't be scared about going to therapy, and don't be scared about going back to school if you need to, because you will find more successes outside than you will inside the cult. And yeah, I'm always just happy sharing my story. So I do appreciate it. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you, Mark. And since you mentioned that, Goldie always drops links. She's the moderator extraordinaire to the Aftermath Foundation. And there's
Absolutely.
links to every video of the description box if you are lurking, because they do listen. And what Mark said is true. Let's give that a caveat to that. You know, there's some stuff to get over. You might have a little bit of PTSD. It's shocking to
Yeah.
realize that everything that you believed in, especially the longer you've been in, is a lie. But once you get over
Yeah.
that, and there's plenty of people out here in videos and stuff to help you with that, it is one hell of a different world than Scientology inculcates into your mind about how evil you think the outside world is. One of the biggest shocks getting out for me was just how kind people actually were.
Yeah.
So with that, Mark, let
Yeah.
us go ahead and add this to the stream, and then you can give us a breakdown of what we're going to kind of
Sure.
be covering today, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So in our last video that Doug and I did a couple weeks back, we talked about different theological stances. And I always have to add a bit of a preface, because when we're dealing with these definitions, I'm taking these definitions from formal definitions, from dictionaries, and also from philosophical websites and philosophical books. So in that sense, I also have to note that there are also colloquial or informal definitions that people will use in basic conversation, which depends on their culture and depends on what area they're from. And so everything counts. I'm just giving you one side. I'm giving the official formal definitions, these academic definitions. But if somebody else has a different informal or colloquial definition of a word, it all counts. It's all part of it. But it's just based upon classes that I've taken in the past. I've taken comparative religious studies classes. I've taken philosophy classes, philosophy of religion classes, especially after I left Scientology, to try to figure out exactly, you know, what it was, and, you know, what's the difference between a religion versus a, let's call it a constructive religion versus a destructive religion. Here, of course, I'm not talking about beliefs. I'm talking more about actions, which separate those two. But I was really curious about what happened to me, and how I could get so mystified into this Scientology thing. And so I felt that looking through the different kinds of theological stances, and then the second part here are these non-theistic religions, philosophies, and other non-theistic stances. I just felt that they were helpful to sort of put into different perspectives on this larger issue, and what do these words mean, and where do they come from, and then if they apply and help other people out, then that's also good too. And I felt that they were very helpful for me, so I hope that they are very helpful for other people as well. So basically, again, we talked about theological stances, so you can go back to our part, was it 5, I think? Was it part 5, Doug, that we did, or was it part 4?
I believe it was part 5, and this is part 6.
Yeah, so I think we're now on 6. I know
But
we've done so
Mark,
many of these.
I'm gonna set a separate playlist and work it out because it's a little
course.
confusing. But the first 3 or 4
Yeah.
videos is Scientology, and then we're just switching over
That's
into
right.
when we started with the New Age and New Thought video. Now we have 3 of a different section, so I'll figure out how to sort it. But,
Exactly.
this is interview number
No worries.
6.
No worries.
Part 2 of the 2-part theological study.
That's
A
right.
lesson in
Okay.
that.
So again, basically, the whole thing is these are just formal definitions, dictionary definitions, and I try to go through a whole range, including some colloquial definitions as well. But don't worry about that. These are just academic stuff. So when we're talking about non-theistic
Can I say one,
religions,
Mark,
of
just
course, of
before you
course, of
get
course, go
started,
ahead.
one quick thing I wanted to invite the audience. Where do you kind of, as you see these things and we go through each of these, where do you guys stand? What are your ideas? And we'll throw your
Mhm.
comments up here and take them as we go. And then also, what are your experiences with certain denominations? Positive, negative? Let us know as we trek along.
Yeah,
But please, I guess we'll start off with the first one
and again,
or the
yeah, and again,
definitions.
to sort of yeah, exactly, to sort of conclude
Mhm.
the thought is that just that
Yeah.
yeah, we're also talking about subjective personal experience, which means it's not just about me, it's about everyone else. So there you go. So yeah, people can definitely include their stories. That would be really cool too. So basically, in the last section, we I use the term non-theistic theological stances, just meaning that the stances didn't include a personal God, but in this case, I'm looking at the term non-theism, and as we can see on the screen here, and not when non-theism in relation to religion and philosophy. Non-theism now is a range of both religious and non-religious attitudes characterized by the absence of espoused belief in the existence of a personal god or gods. So last time I talked about deism, pantheism, panentheism, and how that they were called impersonal views of God. So they also are considered non-theistic views of God because they're not personal. Personal God usually meaning some supernatural being, has a body, hears our prayers, listens, interacts with our destiny, and so forth. There's certain views of God that aren't like that. But in this particular case, in this segment, what we're doing is we're talking about philosophies and religions where there is no espoused belief. So that means that the religion or the philosophy
Sorry,
may
Mark.
not
I was just trying
deal.
to get you on the main
No
screen there,
worries.
but it
It's
only let
okay.
me go on the main screen. God damn it.
No
Sorry about
worries.
that.
So these philosophies and these ideas either have no mention of God or gods. So in one sense, it's a very mild kind of idea. However, then it goes to the other side, which is complete rejection. So this is different. We're not talking about um, non-theistic views of God or theistic views of God. We're simply looking at this range between the philosophy doesn't mention God or is not about God, all the way to there's a rejection. So we're talking about different things. And as we go along, you'll understand because of certain words and terms that we're all kind of familiar with. But then I'm adding different definitions just to break them down. So in
Got it.
this case, again, non-theism, no espoused belief in a personal God or God. Okay. The first one that we have, the first type is agnosticism. And it's kind of this weird little thing with agnosticism because there's been kind of an attempt to redefine the word in the past, I would say 15 years, which I think is a little disconcerting in some ways and also kind of odd in another ways. And I'll explain what I mean by that. But if we
Mhm.
look in the dictionary and we look in philosophical dictionaries, this is what agnosticism means. So agnosticism is the belief that the nature and existence of God or gods is unknown and inherently unknowable due to the nature of subjective experience. And so, where this word comes from is it comes from the 19th century, a gentleman named Thomas Huxley. And Thomas Huxley created the word agnostic, which means a without, Gnosticism, which in this case means knowledge. So, without knowledge is what the word means essentially. And I believe it's
Right,
Greek,
right.
if I'm not mistaken, without gnosis.
Does it
And
come from Gnosticism at all? Is that part of that actual word? Because gnosis means knowledge, right?
so in the modern sense,
Mhm.
it can, because the redefinition of agnostic and gnostic in the past 15 years has been that you can be agnostic, meaning that you don't know something, or
Mhm.
gnostic, which means that you know something. But those
Right.
are not really official words because Gnosticism is an actual, as you know, Doug, it's an actual religious philosophy that
Mhm.
dates back to like the first century, and especially in the Middle East, there are small Gnostic religions. So
Mhm.
just new, it's become, well, somebody knows something or they know something exists, we're going to call them a Gnostic. Whereas if you don't know something, you're called an agnostic. That again, that's relatively new And I'm going to get into that when we go through the different types of agnosticism. But basically, in this context, when somebody calls themselves an agnostic, especially the 19th century and early 20th century, so gentlemen like Huxley, like Robert Ingersoll, especially people like what's his name? Albert Einstein. I don't know. I was drawing a blank there. What
He
they
was
meant was
agnostic.
yes. What they meant in that time was that they neither believed nor disbelieved in God because they saw no evidence either way. In modern times, however, there's a lot of disconcerting kind of rewriting of history and re-terming what agnostic means. And so you might get people who say, like Richard Dawkins, who will say, all agnostics are naive atheists, because when you say that you don't know if God exists, it's implying that you don't believe in it. And so to me, that's also been very strange because the whole entire field of agnosticism is not about believing or not believing. It's about suspending your belief because there's no evidence either way. And so maybe that term no longer exists or should exist anymore. And maybe the modern, you know what I mean? Maybe the modern term is more relatable, but I think it's very weird to sort of say, well, all agnostics are just atheists, because there are different types, and I think that a lot of them can overlap with atheism. Certainly some do, but there are other stances I don't think can. And so I think once we get down to in the next slide, we'll go to the different types and then we can figure that out. But basically agnosticism just means you believe. So it's actually a theological stance. So you believe that the existence of God is unknown and unknowable. A lot of people will also say, and this is another thing that many in the modern atheists and new atheists will say, is that agnosticism is not a theological stance, that it's an epistemological stance, that it's about knowledge and not belief in God. But again, it's the belief that God is unknown, so it is a theological stance. Epistemology is the study of where knowledge comes from and how human beings know something. It actually doesn't have to do with God. And I've taken courses on philosophy and philosophy basics, and only in metaphysics and theology do we study God. In epistemology, we don't study God. So you might hear these things in popular culture and popular media and on Facebook, or on YouTube, for example, where people are trying to make people accept a certain position, for example. However, I just think that it can be a little disconcerting because epistemology and agnosticism is not an epistemological claim, it actually is theological. All of those things are just things that I've picked up over the past, I've been online since 1998 or something, so I've heard a lot of stuff. And I find that there are some things that aren't consistent. And so that's just part of what I've heard. So I just want to sort of add that when it comes to metaphysics and theology, agnosticism is just as much of a stance as anything else that we're going to get into and anything else that I mentioned previously. So it's not an epistemological stance, it is a theological stance. And so I believe, and we'll get into this with the different types, that yes, atheism and agnosticism can overlap, but you can also be an agnostic, and who cares? Like, if that's what you are, then that's what you are. So,
and also to interject real quick, Mark, we are gonna we're on a delay too, guys. We always are when me and Mark talk. So I'm just looking for the opportune time to jump in. But please know I'm not trying to interrupt him on purpose. It's just that we're going to take your comments if they appertain to what we're talking about. Now we're going to get into this later, Mark. That's right. Little teaser, because we both have experience in this field, and I know you have some anecdotes to share. Do you want to take this up now, or do you want me to bookmark this for later? Because I can easily just bookmark that when we get to the appropriate section.
Yeah,
it's a great question.
When we
it's a great
I think
question,
it'll
Mark,
be in 1, 2, 3, like in 3 slides from now.
Okay, and
we'll
not question. I meant great statement, and we will cover that definitely. Please,
we'll cover it. We'll cover it. So the next one now are the different types of agnosticism.
Okay, let me go to that.
Because it's the belief that the nature and existence of God is unknowable because of how we interpret reality. So now we're going to get into both agnosticism and atheism, much like we did previously with certain other forms like panentheism and polytheism. There can be like what is called a hard stance and like a more mild stance. So if you support the idea of if you are a strong agnostic, okay, you take a strong position. So strong agnosticism is the view that the question of the existence or non-existence of God or gods is simply unknowable. And if you are a strong agnostic, sometimes also called a militant agnostic, you would say, when referring to God or gods, you would say, I don't know, and neither does anybody else. So it's not just you as an individual that either doesn't know or can't know if gods exist, but no one else knows either. So it's basically just up to, up to your subjective experience at that point. And again, because it's a strong claim, then that's the strongest form of agnosticism, right? Now, in contrast to this, we have the mild form. So we have mild agnosticism, and this is the view that the existence or non-existence of God or gods is unknown, but is not necessarily unknowable. So if someone is a mild agnostic, they will say that they don't know, so I don't know, but maybe someone else does, or maybe in the future someone will, or we as a species will be able to actually understand whether or not there is or isn't a God. Okay. So this is the mild claim. So the person you're saying, you know what, I don't really know if there's a God, but who knows? Maybe the Pope does. Maybe the Pope, or maybe, someone else has some inherent knowledge that you don't have. So it's the claim that you don't know something, but other people might be able to know, and who knows about the future. So basically, that's just the difference between whether you take the strong position or you take the mild position. And really, that's about it. So I don't know, and neither does anyone else, or I don't know, but maybe someone else does. So those are just those two as far as strong or mild. So after that, do you have a
Okay,
question,
let me
Doug?
pull
Sorry, you can
that.
go ahead.
No, J Dice, that is starred, and we will definitely be taking that up as it's part of the atheist
Yes,
question.
we will.
Excellent question.
We will. Yeah,
They want to get right to the atheist shit, Mark, because
we're
I
going to do
mean,
that after this. Don't worry about it. We're going to do it
yeah,
after this.
yeah. No, take your
But
time, but yeah,
yeah,
so
then the next one is called apathetic agnosticism, and this is pretty self-explanatory. But
apathetic
the
agnosticism.
definition is that the view is the view. Excuse me. Apathetic agnosticism is the view that since God or gods that may exist appear unconcerned for the universe or the welfare of its inhabitants, that the question is basically academic. And so I kind of kind of love this. I don't know and I don't care. So if someone talks to you about God and you just say, you know what, I don't know and I don't care, then you're an apathetic agnostic. And in fact, I think a lot of people are probably there are quite a few people who call themselves agnostic who in the end just don't care. They might not have a hard or a strong or a mild stance. It's just whatever, and there's a lot of people who are like that. They don't know, they're not sure, no one's ever going to know, so what's the point? We're just going to live our lives, and we'll find out if there is such a thing after we're gone, or we won't, who knows. And so that's just apathetic agnosticism. And certainly I think that's that's kind of a very also called pragmatic agnosticism, because it's also very pragmatic.
Pragmatic. I
Yeah,
guess it all
it's
depends on your
very
viewpoint, right? Yeah. That
exactly,
may be
it's
very
very bare bones.
unpragmatic to someone who believes in spirituality or what have you, right?
Exactly, exactly. It is subjective, of course.
And also,
But
I have to
after this one,
interject real quick, Mark, to get to the really
sure,
important
sure.
stuff here. If you don't smash the like button, I'll sick L. Ron Hubbard, who is alive and well in the chat, and he's ruthless on
Mhm.
ethics. Please
He
continue,
is.
sir.
Well, ethics when it comes to other people, not himself, but that's a
Of course.
digression.
Right. Great point.
He's
We
the
covered that
exception
in
for his own
4
ethics.
episodes. Yep.
Yeah. Anywho, um, the next one here says practical agnosticism. This is what people like Thomas Huxley were getting into, and Robert Ingersoll. The idea was that there's no proof either way. So we have to acknowledge that not only is there no proof or evidence that there is a God, there equally would be no proof or evidence that there isn't a God. And I think it's interesting that the lack of evidence, right, does not equal evidence. And so a lot of people will say, well, we can't see God, or we can't feel God, or we can't experience God. Like when we look up to the night sky, we don't see a gigantic man. But I've always thought to myself, well, that doesn't prove that the other side is true either. So if that's kind of the same thing, it's like, yes, I understand that we look up in the night sky and there's no gigantic man in the cloud. Okay, totally understandable. But that doesn't mean that the other side is necessarily true. And so that's kind of a practical stance. And so this is what people like Huxley, like Ingersoll, they were just saying they don't really care about belief or non-belief. Their whole thing was looking at the facts and looking at the evidence. So that's it. You can't prove, you can't prove a negative, of course. But whatever. I mean, again, that's just one vision. So the 19th century agnostics were very practical. A lot of them were scientists, and they were simply just wanting to do science, and they were trying to take from nature whatever nature was giving back to them. And they didn't necessarily see anything supernatural, but they didn't necessarily also say that there wasn't anything. It was just kind of a middle position, and that's where we get practical agnosticism.
Good point, Debbie. I mean, it depends on what you're smoking. I've seen many gigantic men and women in the sky. It just
That's
depends
true.
on what you
That's
got
true.
going in the bowl.
It could be.
Thank you, Jane. All right, so I guess that was an excellent explanation. So trucking right
So
along.
the next one rounds out the last three versions.
Oh, my
of
bad. The
agnosticism.
practical. Didn't
Yeah.
you kind of intercede that with didn't we talk about practical agnosticism earlier? Am I
Yeah.
smoking whatever was in that pipe?
Well, we talked, a little bit about that. It's like, again, it's back to the Thomas Huxley 19th century. That was the original definition of the term agnostic, which is that people are not going to believe or not believe in God because there's no evidence either way.
And what they're
that's
using as
basically where it comes
evidence.
from.
I see. And what they were using as evidence, obviously, was can I see it, taste it, touch it, smell it? In other words, can I
Yes.
sense it through the five senses? We're not getting into any metaphysics shit at this point.
That's right. Exactly.
Got it. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So that
to
covers
round out,
agnosticism.
we have one more on agnosticism. One more.
I'm sorry, man.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
No worries.
I thought you just said it. Okay. Practical agnosticism, right?
No, we have one more. We have three more. Yeah, three more after. This.
Okay.
And then
See, I was up
rounds
to
out
speed.
agnosticism. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. My bad. Sorry, Mark.
So in this one, this is empirical agnosticism. So this is the view that if there is a God or gods, little to nothing can be known about him or it or them. So it would be that there's just this big separation between knowledge. And so even if some kind of God did actually exist and were to exist, because maybe getting a little bit of overlapping with deism, that it doesn't necessarily look like that God is necessarily terribly interested. And so human beings would never be able to define that. And maybe when we also talked about transtheism, which again is the idea that God goes beyond theism and also goes beyond atheism, there's kind of some overlap there because the idea would just be that it's just too complicated. God is too big. We just wouldn't be able to know anything about it. So that's really what empirical means. Empirical has to do with our senses and how we experience reality. It has to do with physicals and stuff like this. So, in that case, that's what empirical agnostic means. And that's just sort of rounding out that particular one. So practical and empirical have some overlap, but they are considered two different schools. I will say too that empirical agnosticism is something that comes later in the 19th century and the early 20th century. So remember, a lot of times when these thoughts are being developed, they kind of start with a definition. So Huxley begins agnosticism with a definition, and then those definitions are expanded on. And so in the late 19th and early 20th century, most agnostics, like Huxley, like Ingersoll, even like Charles Darwin, called himself an agnostic. They
Huxley,
were more
Aldous Huxley, Marcus. You're talking about Aldous Huxley, the writer of Brave New World. Okay.
Thomas Huxley.
Okay. There's a big. My bad. There's a.
Sorry about that. Thomas Huxley. Yeah.
While we're on it, Mark.
And then, yeah.
I'm sorry. Thomas Huxley and who? I didn't. Please.
Thomas Huxley, Robert Ingersoll, Charles Darwin. So they put
Okay.
together more of what is called practical and empirical agnosticism. So that's the agnosticism of the late 19th and early 20th centuries.
Got it. And Marilyn
Yeah.
has a question. Mark, are the words faith and belief interchangeable here in this discussion? According to you, Mark.
That's
I
a
know
good
it's not
question.
a scholarly question, but
Well,
what do you think?
I think they can have a lot of overlap, and that's one of the things where it's a little bit tough because technically a belief is simply a statement about the world which someone holds true, and faith is usually like something that's almost the same, but there might be a couple of tweaks. Like faith might be more intense, whereas belief can be kind of mild as well. People have faith in like humanity or faith in teaching, but you can also believe in it. So I got to be honest with you, it's a little bit beyond. How I see it is that belief ranges between something that's very mild and something that's very strong, whereas like faith tends to be more intense, I think, and kind of implies that there's no evidence, but you believe in it anyway. So that's why it's a little bit more intense. But now that we have the dictionary open, yeah, thank you, Doug, because
Yeah, no
um,
problem.
yeah, complete
So,
trust or confidence in someone or
yeah,
something.
that is
And a
strong what you
belief
just
and a,
said.
and a belief again, a belief kind of overlaps because a belief is like a worldview. A belief is how you see the world,
Mhm.
but I don't think that implies trust. I'm not really sure. You know what I mean? Like they overlap quite a bit, but they're not exactly the same, right?
By the way, Mark, it's really funny the sentence that they use to demonstrate this one, which is a complete
Yeah.
misnomer. This restores one's faith in politicians. Uh-huh, right. But the one we're really looking at is a theological one, number 2, strong belief
Yes.
in God
Yes.
or
Yeah.
in the doctrines of a religion based on spiritual
Yeah.
apprehension or rather than proof. What do they mean by that word
Right.
apprehension? That's an interesting word there.
I
Based on
don't know.
spiritual apprehension. Oh, that means apprehending, having some
To
contact with
apprehend the spiritual. Yeah.
that's very interesting rather
And
than
then look up
proof.
look up look up belief.
I
Look
was
up belief
going
because I'm
to.
pretty
That's a
sure.
good
Yeah, I'm
call.
pretty sure. Again, it's something like a statement which somebody holds true.
An acceptance that a statement is true or that something exists. Exactly. His belief and the value of hard work. That's something
But
Scientologists can
then
appreciate.
faith is part of it. See, faith
Here
is
we
part of
go
it.
to
Trust,
well,
faith,
they
and
are almost
confidence.
interchangeable, it sounds like, Marilyn.
Yeah,
Trust, faith, or
yeah.
confidence in someone or something. That's almost exactly what we heard on
I
the other
think
one.
I think faith will almost obviously overlap with certain religious ideas, especially like gods and whatever, or
Mhm.
the Christian faith, the Jewish faith, the Islamic faith. But I think like when you say belief, I don't know. Yeah, I guess you're right. It's a little nitpicky thing that it's kind of hard to even explain, right?
Yeah, it's a great question though, Marilyn. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. Thank you, Marilyn. The next one here are the last two ones. Okay. So about now going back to around 2006, Richard Dawkins wrote a book called The God Delusion. This is where he calls pantheism sexed up atheism. He says all agnostics are naive atheists. Really weird. I don't know. It's a really weird book. I never liked it. It was like the gospel for many years amongst my atheist friends, and I say gospel, non-literal. Um, but what came out of it was this idea that you have Gnostic and agnostic theists and Gnostic and agnostic atheists. So the idea is that one can know that God exists and believe that God exists. So you're a Gnostic theist. Or in this case, you can be an agnostic theist, which essentially means is the view of those who do not claim to know of the existence or non existence of God or gods, but they still believe anyway. So you don't know, but you still believe. And then he coined the term Gnostic and agnostic atheist. So if you're a Gnostic atheist, then you know that God doesn't exist and you believe that God doesn't exist. Whereas if you're an agnostic atheist, this is, of course, the view of those who claim not to know of the existence or non existence of God or gods, but then they don't believe in them anyway. So it was a way to kind of meld both of those things together. And that seems to be pretty popular. As I said, I still think that one can just be agnostic. They can just be a theist, and then all those different types that we talked about before. And they can also just be an atheist. But it looks like these two last terms have been very I guess you could say, like, popularized, and so there's a lot of talking points that come with it. And so usually what happens is, if people who believe in this paradigm, what they will say is, "Do you believe in God?" Right? That's their question. If you say yes, you're automatically a theist. If you say no, you're automatically an atheist. And then they'll say to you, "Is there a God?" If you say yes, you're automatically Gnostic. And if you say no, you're automatically agnostic. And then they put them two together. I think, to me, that's like having two false dichotomies together. So I don't know if two false dichotomies make a positive dichotomy, but it sounds weird. It's like, where's my third option? Because that's what, when we encounter what are called false dichotomies, you can either be one thing and it's either all good or all bad, or you can be this other extreme and it's either all good or all bad, and there's no middle. You're always supposed to ask, I'm a person who says, well, what's my third option? So if you're saying,
This happened, Mark, can you hear me? This happened when we were in setup, so Mark might have lost his connection. This may or may not happen a couple times, just because we have a shitty connection, I think. So in the meantime, this might be a good time to... Mark, you can't hear me, can you? Those are perfect TRs, by the way. Like, he freeze frame. That's what a Scientologist looks like when they're doing TR0, when they're staring right at you. That's terrifying. Can you come out of that, Mark? Anyways, I'm sure he'll join us in a minute. I'll look at the bottom here when he appears. Let's take some... I start some things here. Yeah, it's when you start spouting their beliefs at you. That's the problem I kind of have. And that makes me wonder, like, has that person... Whenever anybody starts going off on a tangent, like they're so certain about this is the way, Jesus is the way, the Bible is the only way, whatever the hell they say, right? No pun intended. I immediately go, why aren't these people questioning, their own beliefs? Why are they so confident? It reminds me of the confidence that I had in Scientology. Now, Scientology is a destructive cult, and that's very different than religions, as we talked about before. But as soon as somebody starts jamming me with their beliefs, I immediately... I don't know. They're just a little sus. That's just completely my opinion or whatever. Anyways, Mark, every time you drop
sorry,
out,
guys.
oh, it's fine. If you do, that'll be an
Yeah.
opportunity to take comments and stuff from people. But yeah,
Yeah, I
excellent,
can't
Jane
apologize.
in
My
Scotland.
internet's gonna maybe come in and out every once in a while. We're
Totally
pretty
fine,
far
man.
away from each other. So, but
Mhm.
anyway, my
He's
whole
in
thing about
Budapest.
that,
Yep.
about this, yeah. Do you believe, or yes or no? Do you know, yes
Mhm.
or no? What's my third option? And so I don't know. It's a paradigm that works for people, and I do accept these terms. Like, I know that there are people that are agnostic theists and agnostic atheists. So that's fantastic. I think that they're actually very good and very honest positions. But I hate being presented with yes or no questions, and then people in
Yeah,
their
me too.
mind, either, when someone asks you a yes or no question, I learned this from journalism school, it usually has an agenda. So if someone's going to ask you, do you believe in God? They already have their
Mhm.
answer in their head. So they want to know if they're supporting you or they're not supporting you. They want to know if you're smart or you're stupid. And I just can't stand that stuff. Like, I want to get rid of all that nonsense of, like, do you believe yes or no? And yes
I
makes
know.
you
It's too
something and no
simple.
makes you something.
Yeah,
It's
black and
just my
white
thing.
kind
Anyway,
of...
anyway,
Yeah, no,
it
it's
is
well
very
said.
black and white, but
And that's the
anywho,
one
so
thing that I try to get rid of coming out of a cult, is to think more in shades of gray. Not that you
oh my
can't
God,
know
yeah.
or have beliefs or whatever, but yeah, as soon as
No,
I hear that black and white thinking, when someone comes at me with the certainty of whatever their particular belief system is. I see it in
yeah.
the comments, for example. If they follow Islam, they'll start quoting almost as if like a computer program, like they're repeating back scripture, and it's like, that's a complete turnoff.
Yeah.
And someone that probably
It is
hasn't
for me too.
questioned too much if they're that freaking certain. You know what I mean? By the way, that was there's nothing wrong with your internet. It's just we have Elron using his OT powers against you. He is on target too, but
Well,
somehow he's able to beam and fuck with our internet anyways.
and as
Keep
I've
at it,
told
Elron.
Ron
We'll just keep 10xing shit like Chad says, man.
I've told
Bring it,
this to
sir.
Ron before.
Yep.
Ron, I
Yep.
visited Target
Talk to him.
3. I
Oh,
visited
3?
Target 3,
Where
and
is
they're
that?
not interested. It doesn't matter. They're not interested. I'm just saying. You
Oh
know this.
yeah.
I've told you before.
Oh, that's gonna break his heart, because you know what we were told, remember, Mark, as Scientologists, after we clear this, Target 2 is just another
Ugh.
planet and solar system clear. We have many targets. So that's gonna definitely sting. We tell you, Hubbard,
Well,
he keeps coming in the chats, Mark, and he keeps getting his feelings hurt because everybody's like against him and we're sussing his con. But I tell him, you don't
I know.
have to show up. You're the one putting yourself in the bear trap here, sir. But we always love having you.
Hip hip hooray!
Hey, man. No pun intended. Where are we at
All right,
here?
now let's move.
Agnostic
If we
theism?
can move,
Yeah, please.
yes. Now we're all
Sure.
we're all done again.
Okay,
Agnostic
next one.
theism, yeah, and we'll go on to the next one, which is atheism.
Okay. Uh-oh, here we come. Now, here comes the controversy, what you've been waiting for in the second hour here. Okay,
We've
hit it,
all been
Mark.
waiting for it. Okay, so
Oh, by the way, open
Sure.
discussion in the chat. Please bring whatever you want to say.
Yes.
Goldie only, I've never seen Goldie boot out anybody, including myself, so if I can get away with it, you guys can too. We don't have any complete dickheads in the, but yeah, please bring your challenges. Hit it, Mark.
So atheism, again, it's actually something that's has a very long history going back to the Greeks. And of course, athe, no God or without Godism. And when you look it up in the dictionary, every dictionary you're going to find, it's the belief that God or gods do not exist. Now, I know a lot of people will look at what I'm going to get into when we talk about mild atheism, and they will say that that is the definition of atheism because groups like American Atheists have made that the definition of atheism. And that's okay because they are a group of people that, are representative of a particular community. Unfortunately, when you look into most English dictionaries, atheism is a belief that God or gods do not exist. So there are different types, and we have to accept all of these different types of beliefs. But we also need to accept as well that until the dictionary people kind of catch up with whatever colloquialisms we're using today, that really that's the actual idea. And I know a lot of people who are atheists might not really like the term belief. They might say, as we get into mild atheism, a lack of belief and absence of belief. Unfortunately, right now, it is the belief that God or gods do not exist, okay? Which means that there's something active, which means that it is a thing, which means that it is an identity. And I know that there are people who are fine with that, but I also know that there's a lot of people who are completely opposed. They'll say atheism is not a thing, it's just the lack of belief, it's just an absence. They'll say it's not an identity, but I kind of find that to be a little weird considering how many conferences are on atheism, how many like communities there are with atheism, how many books. Like, if it's really not a thing, right, then there's this entire wealth of knowledge and people that go to these conferences, and there's like human rights groups and civil rights groups for something that isn't a thing. And I've always been very, very, very weirded about that. So the definition saying that it is the belief that God or gods do not exist, that would, in my opinion, be more relevant and more pertainable, I guess, if that's a word, to what they're doing. Because if it isn't a thing, then why would you go to a conference? Why would you have a civil rights group? Why would you have an identity? Why would you need people around? Like, it, to me, that doesn't make sense. Now, albeit that might be a small proportion of people that are making those arguments, I don't really know, but I just think that it's better to sort of think of it as a belief, and then we get into the different types, if that makes sense.
Now, Mark, would you, any atheists in the audience, please let us know what you think. What would be your definition of atheism? Now, Mark, I can play devil's advocate because I'm clueless about this area. My first thought and the things that I've gotten into with atheists, Andrew Gold, who I did an interview with, as an atheist, for example, and I kind of questioned him on it because I found myself running into this community, the humanist community, the skeptic community, and the atheist community. I found them to be, even not all of them, and like I said, I'm new here, guys, on this area, so correct me if I'm wrong, but my first introduction to the atheist crowd was by way of angry atheists leaving all sorts of crazy comments saying, I believe in science or whatever, trust the science and all this shit. And they seem to be more defensive and religious than religious believers in their convictions. So would an atheist be someone who believed in science, the five senses? If I can see it, then it exists. What would be a I know that there's probably many different denominations, and there isn't going to be one belief for all atheists.
Yeah.
But what do you think an atheist would say as to why they're so fervent in defending that they don't have a belief system? They just believe in science, right?
Well, that would be some people. Remember, if someone's an atheist, all it means is that they either don't have like they I guess what you would say is they either believe that their gods don't exist or that they have an absence or a lack of a belief in a god. Then that
Right.
would be where they would end. So
I
that would
see.
be where there would be a side note, like that's where the bookcase or the bookend goes. And then after that, many of them might find humanist communities, secular humanist communities, skeptics
And could you
groups. But
define the difference, if there is any, in
yeah,
between humanists and
we're
atheists? Or is
we're
that
going
part of
to
the
I'm going
slides?
to do that.
Got
Yeah,
it. Got it.
absolutely, absolutely. So
Excellent.
when we get to the different types of atheists, if we go back to the slide, um, the first stance is called strong atheism. So this is something where this is used, okay, to describe atheists that make this strong case, right? This, like I mentioned, for agnosticism, there's this
Hmm.
strong agnosticism, right? I don't know, and neither do you. A strong atheist is used to describe atheists who accept that God or gods do not exist or that there is no God or gods. So I do find sometimes that this position is dumbed down by a lot of people who are in groups of atheists in favor of the mild position, which is, and I'll go through both of them now because I've mentioned mild atheism a few times. So mild atheism, in contrast to strong atheism, is defined as the lack of a belief in God or gods and is usually overlaps with agnostic atheism. So what I find is when you go to humanist communities, skeptic communities, the kind of I don't know what you want to say, the kind of discourse maybe is the term, or the kind of feeling or the kind of presentation that they want the group to be involved in is the more agnostic atheist, mild atheist kind of idea. But they can't ignore, and they try to, but they can't ignore these strong atheist claims. So I also find sometimes, and this is from 7 years of going back and forth, atheist, skeptic, humanist groups, is that because a lot of them can be echo chambers, and echo chambers don't have to just be atheist, they can be 100% Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Scientologist. They can be dojos, they can be fitness centers. Like an actual echo chamber will turn someone who generally is a mild atheist into a stronger atheist, but many of them still claim to be more mild atheists. So I have heard a lot of people who, to the public, will claim to be mild atheists, but when they're alone, right, they will say, like, there is no God. And we know that there is no God because science hasn't disproven the existence of God. It hasn't proved it, but it hasn't disproved it. That's a totally different issue. So the science that sometimes is used, and I'm going to get into this when we talk about skepticism, because that is one part of this presentation, is that sometimes we have to realize what science can and can't do. And science doesn't prove metaphysical worldviews, and it doesn't prove religion. It doesn't prove non-religion. Like, legitimately, guys, I did this just last week because I wanted to prepare for this. There's this new chat application, this new search engine called, is it Chat GPT or GPT
Oh
or whatever
no, you
it's called?
found that fucking thing
I,
too, man.
I,
Yeah, that thing's
it's great. I love it. It's
incredible.
AI.
Yeah,
It's
me
like
too.
it is literally, it's the
It's
computer
crazy.
on the Starship Enterprise. Okay. So I typed in a couple questions to this chat. Now remember, this is AI that has accumulated knowledge for like all over the internet for I don't know how many years. I mean, it's incredible. So go to that chat site and type in, has God or has science disproved the existence of God? Or what does science think of God? Like, type in something that has science and God related, and what you'll find is the stuff that I learned in my science classes, which is science doesn't talk about God. It hasn't proven God exists. It hasn't disproven God that exists. So I think sometimes when we use the word science, and when skeptics use the word science, they're actually talking about something different. They're talking about a philosophical position. They're not actually talking about science itself.
Are you
Now,
saying
I
you don't
do,
trust science, Mark? I'm going to turn you into Fauci immediately. What science are we
well,
talking about here?
exactly. This is the thing, right? So if we're talking, for example, and damn it, Doug, you made me lose my train of thought. No, I'm kidding.
I'm so
If
sorry.
we're talking, it's
That
okay.
was
If we're
that was yeah. That was
if we're talking
sorry.
about a philosophical position, that's different than biology, right? If like, because the idea that like every scientist is an atheist, that's not true. That every scientist is a skeptic is not true. They have a different philosophical position about science, but it's not a scientific perspective, it's a philosophical perspective. And again, I will get into this later. And again, I want to say that's okay, because here's the thing. I like skeptic groups. I like a lot of the skeptics groups because what they do is very interesting. So, for example, we know that there's a lot of like medical fraud, especially in the United States, right? Skeptics
Really?
go after
Oh,
that medical fraud. Okay,
how so?
sometimes. Well, if we look at things like
Like
Reiki,
Narcanon?
or
Reiki, okay.
yeah, or pseudosciences. Okay,
Why won't they go
the
after
whole point.
Narcanon?
Well, they kind of do. I mean, there's a whole thing on that.
It's true.
But
That's true, actually.
things that are medical based, that don't have actual evidence behind it, alternative medicine. Now you can make the argument that okay, it's harmless because if somebody takes homeopathy or whatever, who cares? Okay, that's a different discussion. But there actually is good science to say that certain of these things like electromagnet therapy and whatever,
Touch
reflexology,
assists.
actually don't work. So
Are you saying
touch
touch
assist,
assist and nerve assist don't work? Because that's a form
I'm
of
saying
Reiki.
I'm
I'm
saying that, yes.
I'm just playing the
And
devil's
so
advocate. You know,
and
I don't
so
advocate for that. I'm just
oh,
playing the
I know.
Scientologist.
But I am just saying that there are good debunkings that those organizations have done, but I think that you there's certain questions that they can't answer. Put it that way. Like, yes, we can know whether or not a medical practice works and has good science to back it up, but then there's other cases that we just can't know, or we can't do it because it's metaphysical. And so that to me is where there's this line that sometimes I think some people, like, they say to scientists, they say they're playing God, right? So that's it. That's something that scientists try to do when they have too much power, and they think that they can do everything, but then nature comes in or an institution comes in to say, hey, let's settle it down. So all I'm saying is when atheists say that they have science on their side, or they believe in science, and science, for example, will prove everything, like there'll be no mysteries in the future because science will prove everything right or wrong. I think that's more of a philosophical position than it is a scientific position. And again, it's totally okay to believe that if you want to believe that. But the moment you go to learn and study science, which the overwhelming majority of skeptics are not scientists, they're not actually practicing scientists, they're doing skeptical inquiry, which is a totally philosophical position. They're not doing scientific. Okay, they're not in labs studying microbiology. They're not, going out to lakes to clean rivers or whatever. They're not looking at microbes through microscopes. They're just showing up to psychics and saying, okay, you can't talk to the dead because of cold readings, or they're showing up to, whatever, electromagnet practitioners, and they're explaining how magnets actually work. So again, I think it's more of a philosophical position. I don't necessarily think it's an actual science position. I can be wrong. Certainly, there are people who will think that I'm wrong. That's totally okay. I, however, would just be skeptical of the claim that somehow only atheists know science and that they're the only ones who can interpret science. I just think,
No,
to me,
no.
that's just shooting themselves in the foot.
I already told you, Fauci claimed that he is science on national television, and if you doubt him, you doubt science. So I think we already got that sorted. Don't look behind
Sure.
door number 2. The science isn't anything that we think it is anymore. It's according to what Fauci said, who, by the way, is backtracking.
All right.
I never told people to lock down. What are you talking about? I thought the science was in, sir. Did we cover? So that's strong. We only
So
got the
that's those are
strong.
the last. So
Did we
strong
cover all of them?
atheism is
Okay.
no, the last two we haven't done yet. So I just
Okay.
want to make this clear again.
Sure, please.
Atheism is a belief that God or gods don't exist. The strong atheists will say that there is no God. A mild atheist, which is probably the most popular position right now, says that
Okay.
there's a lack of a belief. Now there is apatheism. So this is apathy and atheism. It overlaps with apathetic agnosticism. Some people just don't care. there's indifference. They're not interested in religion. They're not interested in God. These are the people that are called apatheists. So apathetic atheists. Okay. However, the last one I want to get to,
Apathetic atheist.
because in these groups, in these humanist groups, skeptics groups, and atheist groups, you will find a lot of people who are anti-theists. So anti-theists, this is the complete rejection of all varieties of theism. So if you've listened to our last video, think of someone who rejects every single one of those things, and they believe that God or gods are not only detrimental to human society, but also to human development.
Wow,
So they
that's not
think that,
that's not. There's obviously a difference between that and Satanism, but I guess I don't really see
right,
much in. Okay.
in a sense. Now, here's the thing: many strong atheists are anti-theists, but
Mhm.
not all. Excuse me, all. I'm gonna work that backward. All anti-theists are strong atheists, but not all strong atheists are anti-theists. In the
Wow.
sense, I
Mhm.
think the anti-theists, this is when I sometimes say anti-religious fundamentalists. I have had the worst, most horrible conversations with people that self-identify as anti-theists. It is just like, talking to a wall. There are people that show up to these atheist groups that have T-shirts that have the word God with the circle and the X through it. It's like, dude, get over it. Like, I know that you don't believe, but do you have to like have a fashion? Like, I don't even wear a Star of David, and if I do, I wear it under here. You know what I mean? It's like advertising. They've got stickers on their laptop. It's like, get over it. We know you don't believe in God. That's fine. Like, I'm told we're all good, but there's this like huge, like, we've got to change the planet because we believe. It's like a savior complex, and I just can't stand it. And unfortunately, just as there are in every group, there are mild people that are very moderate. Like, I find mild atheists to actually be very nice, you can have very good conversations. They tend to be very mild, but then there's always people who come in and ruin it for everyone else. And to me, that's the anti-theists. And I also do know that there are many atheists in general who cannot stand anti-theists because they come in and they're just in their own head and everything is bad, and they're so, like, it's just, you can't have a conversation with them. They know everything, and I don't know, it's really, really frustrating. And again, all groups have good eggs and bad eggs, and as per my subjective personal experience, anecdotal evidence here, anti-theists ruin it for everyone else. Because again, I do know people who are atheists. They're very mild, they're very moderate, they're very good people. For example, I believe that there are people that are atheists who are much like better people than religious people. I don't think religion, you have to be religious to be a good person. I think overwhelmingly there are tons and tons of good atheists out there, just like there's good everyone. Your belief system has nothing to do with it. It's how we act in life. And some of these like anti-theists, it's really, really just from another world. And after a while, I just don't want to be I just don't want to be associated or part of them. And even me, I'm cynical, and I get told by people that I bring them down. These are people that are just bring me down. Like, it's incredible, guys. It's really, there are very few people, but they're very loud, and so they end up taking over conversations. They end up doing all these things, and I got to tell you, there's probably something more. It's probably not just their religious experience. Maybe they've had abuse. Maybe they have mental illness. I don't know, but something is not, it's not fitting, it's not coalescing. And that's a big reason, one of the reasons why I kind of stepped away from some of these groups and started exploring my own beliefs, was because it's too much, even for me as someone who is considered a cynic by a lot of more optimistic, positive Canadians that tend to be very, always smiling. Like, I'm kind of the more realist person, but even I can't stand anti-theists, and that maybe should say something, I don't know. So
Yeah, I think
there you
Jay
go.
Dice summed it up nicely.
Yeah,
Anti-theist, fundamentalist believers. And whether it's believing in your football team, a certain president or political
I don't
leader,
know.
or religion or atheism, anybody that holds, I define religion, just my own way of defining it, even though it's not true. I define a religious believer as anybody who has a firm belief where they're quite certain they know what they're talking about. Remember
Yeah.
that? And then an unmoving belief system is what I'm saying, where there's a conviction
Right.
and a certainty that's a little bit scary sometimes, where
Mhm.
it can kind of shut down the mind to other information. You know what I thought of, Mark, is the famous phrase that you deal with on grade 4 in Scientology called the service facsimile, what you use to make yourself right and others wrong. So it's this little corny word that
Okay.
do you ever remember that
Yeah.
in Scientology? It's called your
Like
surfacking.
vaguely.
It's what you handle on grade
Yeah.
4, and
Okay.
it's basically what you
Oh,
would
okay.
describe as a narcissist, like, where they just always think they're
Right.
right and the other person's wrong, so you take apart in session. Of course, none of this works, you're actually just self-hypnotizing yourself and having false memories implanted, but it
Yeah.
tells you it just reminds me of the whole Surfac thing, when somebody comes at me so freaking confident, it's like, "Don't you doubt?" I mean, one thing that getting
No.
out of a cult made me do was doubt everything. It doesn't mean that I didn't reassemble, some belief systems, but I certainly wanted to
Yeah.
kind of get something in the ballpark of truth because, I was so off the mark with Hubbard, it made me kind of paranoid about what else did I grow up believing that was complete bullshit.
Yep. And yeah, vegans, it can be. Again, I know lots of
Yeah, any
incredibly laid back,
so
friendly
do I.
vegans who just say,
Oh, I thought you were gonna say
look,
crazy ones. I know crazy ones too.
well, there are. But I'll tell you, like, because when I go to Los Angeles, I find because it's like the capital of vegan food, there are actually some vegan restaurants that I really, really love in Los Angeles. And yeah, there's people who are just, it's in their head and they can't understand why people consume animals. And you're thinking, holy shit, we've been doing this for thousands of years. Like, calm down. But I do know people that are pretty chill. So you're always going to find a spectrum. But again, one of the problems is when the radicals take over the conversation, their voices become the loudest. So let's say even we go to a humanist group or a skeptic and atheist group, and only 10% are anti theist, radical, anti religious fundamentalists. Their voices drown out the 90%. And so, what can you do? You can't fight that stuff. You're never going to convince that person that they're wrong because they look up in the night sky and they don't see a gigantic man, and they've been convinced that human society would be better off where no God exists at all, and that babies and children shouldn't be introduced to religion or the world around them because somehow they'd be better. And I'm thinking to myself, they would not be any better with anti-theism, but that's my opinion. And whatever.
Maybe
What can you say?
maybe a gray area is more applicable because if you grew up in any
Yeah,
fundamentalist household, pushing your religion, pushing the
yeah,
Bible. Let's say you have a fundamentalist Christian
yeah,
mother. They, for that mother to hold the belief of a child as they're growing up that they're going to go to
yeah.
hell if they don't take to it,
Mhm.
that can sub implant in the subconscious, especially between 0 and 6 when our minds are forming, and even then some.
Correct.
That you can carry those beliefs with you for the rest of your life and not know
Yeah.
why you might feel a little inferior. So yeah, I don't think it's a good idea at all to push. This is why I didn't have kids, man, because I already knew I was fucked up, and it's like until I figure out my own shit, I don't want to accidentally because parents aren't doing it out of
Yeah.
malevolence; they believe in it, man. But it's like
Yeah.
you better be pretty sure about what you believe because you're going to pass that on to your kids, and you might fuck them up, and they didn't do anything
Mhm.
except what you
Preaching
tell
to the
them.
choir, Doug.
You
Yeah.
know what I've heard, Mark?
In
Like
my case, it's the same thing.
kind of like what I think a
A
good
little
idea
bit.
might be what you did, and you explore everything. Like, okay,
Yeah,
if you're a fundamentalist Christian, open up your kid to all the different religions, show him all
absolutely.
the information humanity has, and let him come to his conclusions rather than beating down your own ideas that might completely fuck your kid up while you have the quote unquote best of intentions, right?
Exactly, exactly. And there's things that people can do. I'm not, by the way, I want to really emphasize this. I'm not trying to convert anybody, but if you live in the United States of America, the Unitarian Universalist Association is one of those groups that can be very helpful if you want to learn about different religions and point of views. Whether you believe or not, doesn't matter how you identify, they are very accepting. And if I was a parent, even though I'm Jewish, so I would want to raise my children Jewish, but I would also want them to have access to the religious education of all different religions. And I might even want to go to a Unitarian congregation if one exists because I know that they learn about different religions. So even if they come out as an atheist, they're not going to come out as some fundamentalist anti-theist. They're going to come out as a good person first who happens to lack belief in God. And I don't care about that. I would really, really just like the person to be a good person. and not be one of these fundamentalists, because I wouldn't be in control of my children's beliefs. So I'm just saying that to the people who are out there. If it helps you, great. If it doesn't, ignore it. That's totally fine. But as per my personal experience, I would take my children to synagogue because they are Jewish. I would want them to be a part of their faith. My faith is a conservative movement, which means, of course, it's mainline. We're not radicals. We're very much modernized. But here on Sunday, maybe we'll go to a Unitarian church so we can learn about different beliefs. And then after that, you pick the one you want. My parents kind of did that for me when I was exploring my different religious beliefs. My parents were hippies. They were very liberal. So they were like, fine, go to church, go to synagogue, go to a mosque, go to a Hindu temple, go to the Unitarian church, go just explore. And when I was 16 and I went through my rebellious, phase, and I didn't want to have any religion, they were like, okay, it's like, do it, like whatever. They weren't
That's
helicopter. I
excellent.
mean, my mom was kind of a helicopter parentish in certain ways, but at least
So
when
is
it came
mine.
to beliefs, they were kind of more, I guess, trusting me as becoming an adult. So that's just the thing that worked for me. Maybe it'll work for you. Who knows?
Good answer, man. And you did have some
Yeah,
open parents that allowed they didn't just
yeah,
push Judaism on you, they let you
yeah,
explore, which is why you become the person that you have today, and we're having this talk. Have you stumbled
yeah.
across TST in your shirt? Ask Hans Christian. Does that ring a bell?
I have no idea what TST is. I'm sorry.
Can you explain what that
Is
is,
that
Hans? I don't know
spam?
what the hell that is either.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Hans. I
But
don't
I'm
I don't know
intrigued.
what TST is.
Let us
But
know.
yeah,
We'll throw it back
yeah,
up.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, Mark, let me
All right, let's move
switch
on.
over to the next
Let's
slide.
move
We're
on from
doing
that.
great
So
on time, man. We're
yeah.
plowing through this. Excellent.
So
Confucianism, very
Confucianism.
interesting.
All right. This
All
is
right.
now, well, now we're going to start getting into more religion and philosophy. The other ones were more theological stances. Now, Confucianism, very interesting. Confucianism is a very ancient belief that comes from China. It was founded by a philosopher named Confucius, who lived between 551 and 479 before Common Era. So, like a lot of ancient religions or belief systems, this is multifaceted. Some of it kind of reminds me of Judaism and even Zoroastrianism, in the sense that they're so ancient that they're not just religions. They might also be philosophies and cultures, and they might even have a little bit of, ethnicity going on, because technically Confucianism is the religion of the Han Chinese people, and the Han Chinese people are one kind of Chinese peoples whom are the majority of those who live in China today. And so their ethnic religion is Confucianism. So it's often been called a tradition, a philosophy, a religion. You can see here a humanistic or rationalistic religion. It's a way of governing. They have laws very similar to Judaism. They have, like, the laws are not the same, but I'm meaning that we have a set of laws. They also have sets of laws and a way of life. Okay. So ultimately, they believe in ancestor worship. They also have superstitions that they do and rituals that they do as well. And it's a very human centered kind of idea. And again, multifaceted. And a lot of it has to do with virtues, and a lot of it has to do with living a peaceful life. Now, of course, there are certain things that we can get into. When I was studying East Asian and Eastern Asian history as an undergrad, we looked at hierarchies. There's social hierarchies in Confucianism, one of which we might know, which is the master student. That's very Confucius. So if you've done martial arts, especially kung fu, and also because it's spread through Asia, even to Japanese culture with karate and so forth, you often have this idea of having a master and the student. If you've watched The Karate Kid, that is very much,
Yes.
Miyagi and Daniel, I think was his name,
Show me
right?
sand the floor. Show me paint
Yeah,
the fence.
that is a
I
very
show
good taste, very good
Eastern
taste of the
philosophy.
hierarchy of Confucianism.
Okay.
If you have Chinese neighbors or Chinese whatever, Chinese neighbors or Chinese friends, and when somebody passes away, they might give an envelope of money, and they might set it next to the photo of someone who's deceased, because they believe that that money can be spent in the afterworld. That has also
Oh
some
wow. Give it to me. I'll
some
take it.
folk religious, some folk, yeah, some folk religious and
What a waste.
Confucianism. So And again, I want to stress that there is, at least in Confucianism, they don't reject any deities, but they don't talk about any deities, very similar to, as we're going to see and later when we are going to talk about a brand of Buddhism. And in that case, instead of denying or rejecting, Confucius philosophy does not actually have any espoused belief or any stance when it comes to any kind of god or gods. So it's more human centric, it's more of a way of life, and it's more of a practice. So there you go. So, and it's also very ancient and very old.
So
All right,
that is
next.
excellent. Okay, now this next one,
Yeah.
not to be confused with atheism and skepticism, although there are
Yes, sir.
there are some crossovers, right?
There's definitely
Perhaps.
some crossovers. So humanism is a very, very, again, interesting philosophy. Okay, so the definition of humanism now, I will tell you that this definition that I got was written by humanists, so it does contain a little bias, but I wanted to give them their own religion, their own definition. So here we go. Humanism is a philosophy that believes in a human-centered rather than a supernatural approach to life. It has an ultimate faith in humankind and believes that human beings possess the power or potentiality of solving their own problems through um, through reliance primarily upon reason and scientific method applied with courage and vision. So this humanism began actually as a cultural and artistic movement in the Renaissance. So there was something called Renaissance humanism. And in the 19th century, it began as a religion. And there were many different religions in the United States of America in the 19th century that practiced exactly that definition of humanism. The idea that human beings, okay, regardless of their faith, were coming together and they were trying to sort of put some of their differences, their theological differences aside. And, because they didn't all agree about God, they didn't all agree what was going to happen after death. But if they got together and they focused on improving society, many of these people were very progressive. A lot of them believed in social justice, and a lot of them believed in it trying to improve society here and now. So then in the 1960s, a gentleman named Paul Kurtz, who lived in the Buffalo area called Amherst, New York, which is where the headquarters of the Center for Inquiry is. It's in Amherst, New York. I've been there a couple times. And he began secular humanism. The idea was that religious humanism, which ultimately branched into two different groups. I mentioned the Unitarian Universalists before. They are considered a religious humanist organization. And then in the 19th century, there was a Jewish gentleman named Felix Adler, and he founded what was called the Ethical Culture Society. And I actually kind of like a lot of the Ethical Culture Society because they say that they put deed before creed. So for them, it was about what people are doing and not necessarily what people are believing. So the Ethical Culture Society and the Unitarian Universalists are humanist groups that believe in the definition that I just read, but they incorporate religious rituals and religious scriptures as sources, and they consider themselves to be a religious congregations and religious organizations. Secular humanism now removed that. They were more materialistic, more naturalistic, which I will get into in slides after this. And they removed the religious rituals. So they do congregate, they do have congregations, but they're referred to as secular congregations, which means that they congregate, they have weddings, they have funerals, they have what they call baby naming ceremonies. So they have these life event celebrations. Secular humanists have chaplains that can go to visit you in the hospital when you're sick and or dying. The difference is they don't call themselves a religion. And so, at least according to the United States government, when it comes down to what is and isn't a religion, the Ethical Culture Society and the Unitarian Universalists, because they call themselves a religion, they get tax exempt status. However, secular humanism does not have tax exempt status because they say that they're not a religion. Now, in my opinion, when it comes to mirroring certain things like secular humanists, again, they have a chaplain, they can do weddings, you know what I mean? There's some overlap, I think. However, at the end of the day, secular humanists will say they're not a religion. Religious humanists will say that they are a religion. And in the United States, that is really the grounds, the beginning grounds of whether they get tax exempt status as a religion or not. Okay, so that's the difference between that. So if you like religious rituals, I like religious rituals. I like going to synagogue. I like the rituals. Okay, sometimes maybe some of them are a little funny and maybe, whatever. I enjoy doing them, so I would identify more with the religious humanist aspects, even though I'm a conservative Jew. Again, conservative meaning mainline. However, I did try to get my hands into secular humanism. Was met with a lot of strong atheists and anti-theists, even though they were the minority. It just wasn't for me, and so I left and I, did something else. So I don't really have, I would say, anything negative to say, except I think that in some cases there are people who believe that secular humanists would be able to do a lot more good if they called themselves a religion, but if they called themselves a religion, it would defeat the purpose of being secular. And so this is where there's this identity thing going on, because they want to have congregations, but they want them to be secular. They want to have chaplains, but they want them to be secular. And again, it's not that people don't deserve these things if that's what they want. If you don't believe in God, you should be able to have a wedding. But I also think that in the modern world, okay, Doug, if I'm getting married and I want to get married in Los Angeles, you, Doug Kramer, you can get ordained and be my officiant at my wedding. Okay. In the
Are you asking?
60s or in the if you want. I need to find a
Sure.
wife first, but that's a whole other thing. That's the easy part. I'm just saying if you wanted to.
Sure, man. Just hit me
Okay.
up whenever you're ready.
But
I can't
but in
help
the
you find a wife. I'm
60s,
looking. I can't find my own. Yeah.
there you go. But in the 60s to 70s, right? If you wanted to get married, it had to be in a church. So
Hmm.
humanists, secular humanists said, that's not fair. Why, if we could only get married, it could only be in a church? Wonderful question. If you're not a believer, have this option. But I think today, people are more likely to choose a friend or a family member or someone who's close to them to officiate a wedding than to have a secular humanist chaplain. And so I think that maybe they need to become more of a religion or not. That's not an issue that is up to me. I know there are people who will say, no, they're not a religion. They can't be a religion. But I do think that there's this weird kind of thing going on. And that was just my experience. I think a lot of it mirrors religion to the point where who knows? But again, it's just one of those things that is, anecdotal as far as I'm concerned. I do want to say too, whereas I've been very, very much inspired by religious humanism, I find that humanism puts way too much emphasis on humanity, the faith in humanity, the perfection of humanity, they'll use a lot.
Hmm.
And I'm just not a fan. I think when we look back, especially as a historian, when we look back at humanity, we can be pretty nasty and brutal to each other. And I just don't have faith in humanity. So I'm ultimately not a humanist, even though I have been inspired and influenced by a lot of religious humanism. And again, I still really like the Unitarian Universalist Society, but that's me. Someone else can have a totally different of view on this, and that's completely okay too. This is the point of having, a free society. So just my thing, but that's it. That's all.
Excellent. And this is, Sandra, we're going to cover AA. There's a guy that's wanted to take this up, and he seemed like the right guest to invite on. So he's comparing
That's
AA
right.
to the bite model and other things. And we
Wow.
will do an episode on this because I've had so many debates because Alcoholics Anonymous, as you know, Mark, is very popular, and some people will swear by it, and some people will say it's
Yeah.
cult-like. So that will be an interesting
Mhm.
one to take up. Yeah, it is interesting that they do the Lord's Prayer at the end of the meeting, and they basically
Mm.
just talks about a higher power. But if you go into there, I'm not an expert on it, but when we do the deep dive on it, I'll make sure I have the slides and everything. But aren't there 10 statements that you have to follow as an AA person? And it does
It's
veer
12
into
steps.
some very, I don't want to say cult stuff until we do a deep dive on it, but AA not everybody had positive experiences with that, and we'll definitely be taking that up,
Yeah.
Sandra. So I guess we will move to the next one, trucking right along,
Mhm.
because we got to the bottom, right? We covered the secular part, or did we cover the bottom?
Exactly. Yeah, we did Confucianism and
Okay,
humanism.
very interesting. What is next? All right,
All right, the next
agnosticism.
one, yes. This one I love, by the way, and I use this when I encounter people that say, "Do you believe yes or no? Do you know yes or no?" Okay, this is a position, but it's also just a really great thing to apply. So, ignosticism or igtheism, the ig in this case stands for ignorance. So, ignorance of knowledge or ignorance of God. Okay. And I love it. This is the view that a coherent definition of God or gods must be put forth before the question of the existence or non existence of God or gods can even be meaningfully discussed. So when somebody asks you, do you believe in God? Okay, an agnostic will say, what is God? So you have to get a definition first because you don't it's not that you don't know that God exists, you're just ignorant of the position. So what is God to the person who's asking the question? And I love it because this one rattles people. When you ask someone, when you say what is God to someone who asks you, is there a God, and they're trying to assume an answer, people get really frustrated with that. But I love it because to me, it adds a whole other layer of thinking where it's like I'm asking the person what do they think God is, and then I will judge whether or not there's a God based upon their own definition. And what I find is really interesting about this is if somebody wants me to say, yes, I believe in a God, or no, I don't believe in a God, they still equally have a view of God. So whether you want someone to be an atheist or a theist in this paradigm, the person still has their own view of God in their head. And I think it just undercuts this entire crap of having these two false dichotomies. Just tell me what you think about God. That's it. And then I'll say yes or no. And then it doesn't make me anything. I'm just responding to your definition. So the assumption here is I'm ignorant. I don't know what you know or what you think about God. You tell me and I'll say yes or no. And I love it. I find it to be kind of cool.
So where does that take us with the I can't even pronounce those words. I'm going to have to get you to
Ig,
pronounce it. Please go for it.
ig. Yeah, ignosticism
Agnosticism.
and
Not okay.
igtheism. Yeah. It just means ignorance,
It
essentially.
is the
Someone's
view that
ignorant.
it is a view that a coherent definition of God or gods must be put forth before the question of the existence or non-existence of God or gods can be meaningfully discussed. When asked, "Do you believe in God?" an agnostic will reply, "What is God?" Well, that's a
Yeah,
reasonable question. That's why I don't ever that word is just has so many connotations.
exactly.
What the hell does it even mean? Define your terms
You know,
first, right?
if you ask a polytheist or a Hindu,
Mhm.
do you believe in God? They would say no, but they're not atheists. You know what I mean? If you ask a
Not really.
pantheist, do you believe in God? They would say yes, but they're not a theist. And so ultimately that paradigm shuts down as soon as God is not a gigantic man who's supernatural, who lives on the cloud, who
Yeah.
is the puppet master. Like that whole paradigm, that whole dichotomy is just taken down. And to me, anything that breaks down these overly simplistic dichotomies and these overly simplistic us versus them definitions, give it to me all day. I love it. And you can really see people, because I've asked this before, people have asked me that before, and I say, what is God? And people get angry. Like people get
It's a
frustrated.
reasonable question.
Yeah, I don't. It's ridiculous, and that's why I love it because you then start to have the other person thinking differently.
Maybe, but not
That's their cognitive
necessarily.
dissonance.
If you
Well, the
take a
cognitive dissonance will kind of kick in a little bit, and you might be able to do some Socratic
possibly.
methods with them.
I don't know. I've
It might
talked to
not
some
work,
true
but
believers of a
worth a try.
religion, and they'll just say, "What do you mean? What's God? It's right here in the Bible,"
Yeah,
and that's as far as it goes.
exactly. So anyway, it's a fun little position. After this one,
Wow. Mhm.
It's a fun little position. But after this one, okay, so this is again when we go back to religions. So this is a religion called Jainism, and it's a very, very
Jainism.
small religion that comes from India. So Jainism is a religion from India that was founded about the same period as Buddhism, so roughly 2,500 years ago, and it was established around 599 to 527 BCE by a person named Mahavira, who was born in a city or near a city called Putna in Bihar, India. And there is no professed belief in God. So they actually do not believe in creators. They don't believe God is a creator. They have some doubts about when it comes to the soul. However, Jain monks take vows, and their vows have nothing to do with God. They take a vow of nonviolence. So Jains will often try to wear clothing that's very simple. They're kind of very environmentalist. They don't want to harm other people. They take an oath of truth, of not stealing, of chastity, and of course, of having no possessions. So when you're a monk, because there are lay followers, but the monks tend to be very, very intense. But again, this is considered a non theistic religion. Their idea is that there is no creator God. They outrightly reject it, yet they're still called a religion because they still have worship and they still have common beliefs and so forth. And I just wanted to present that because it seems to be, of all the religions that have come from India, Hinduism, Buddhism, and Sikhism, Jainism is usually left behind because there's not as many followers. But if you are living in a city like Los Angeles or Toronto or wherever that has a large South Asian community, so from India, from Nepal, from Pakistan, from Bangladesh, from Sri Lanka, you might even have a Jain temple in your city and not even know it. And I just wanted to sort of introduce this one because it's lesser known of all the different religions from India and the Indian subcontinent. But please again understand it's non-theistic, so they don't have a creator god and they don't worship any god. And yet, it's considered again to be non-theistic. So kind of a cool little thing, I think.
Excellent. I've never actually heard of that one before.
That's
This
right.
this next one
Yeah,
seems to be more along my way of thinking, just from the first word, free thought.
that's
What
right.
is
So
that?
the free thought. Okay, so free thought was also a movement beginning in the 18th and 19th century in Germany. And this was one of the very first groups of secular people that organized themselves. And in fact, when they did so in Germany, the Germans kicked them out and they ended up going to America. And there are a number of places in cities in the United States where the German free thinkers settled. Buffalo was one of them, and St. Louis was another one. For whatever reason, they just happened to go there. So, free thought is an epistemological viewpoint. Again, we're talking now about knowledge, which holds that beliefs should not be formed based on authority, tradition, revelation,
Hmm.
or dogma, and that beliefs should instead be reached by other methods such as logic, reason, and empirical observation. So these free thought groups essentially were mainly people who were atheists, deists, agnostics, and so forth. A lot of them joined religious humanist congregations. They kind of melded together. But even today, there are still free thought groups around. They just happen to be more involved in humanist groups than other groups. But essentially, that's it. If you kind of are a little bit anti-authoritarian, I'm kind of like that too. I don't like dogma. I don't like superstition, for example. I'm not a big believer in that in pure logic or pure reason. I think there's other elements going on, but I would say that I gravitate toward this one because dogma and authority and superstition are something that I just don't like. And I think that's a lot of people are like that as well.
Does
So you would be
Scientology have
considered
anything to do with have that experience of not?
just a little
Does
bit,
that
just a
leave
little
a?
bit. Um,
I mean, you don't believe in
just a little.
Xenu? It's not superstition.
Uh,
That's scientific
never.
fact, man.
I never got to Xenu. I never even got onto the Purif, so I couldn't tell you.
Thank God you
Um,
didn't, because that's damaging enough just doing the
but
first step, the
but
Purif.
the free thought movement is an umbrella term today, and it basically means atheist, agnostic, humanist, etc. So they were once, I would say, I guess, more like groups. They were free thought groups and free thought associations, and now they've kind of collected into bigger groups like humanist groups and stuff like that. So it's more of an older 18th, 19th century phenomenon. But that is what a free thinker is. So basically, yeah, someone who just doesn't like authority and whatnot.
That's the one I'd sign up for, minus all the other stuff you just said. I like the free think part. Then it kind of lost me a little bit. Okay, we're getting towards the end, guys. We have this slide, and
just a couple more.
I just ruined the ending, Tom Cruise, but we have a couple more. But we're trucking through these. Okay, so we covered.
Okay, so we'll truck through this. Yeah.
Naturalism, yes, please.
Okay, naturalism. Okay, naturalism is also a worldview, and a lot of people will take this. We have I mentioned before, naturalistic pantheists. This is probably more commonly overlapping with people who are atheists. Yes, Dogma is a great movie. I love it. Thank you, Denver Stevo.
Yes, indeed.
Kevin Smith is fantastic. Dogma is great.
And Denver, let us know when you're launching your channel, because I know you got some upcoming Scientology content, and we'll start dropping the link or Goldie will in the in the chat.
But naturalism is opposed, or is the opposite of supernaturalism. So naturalism is the belief that nature is all that exists, and that all things supernatural, such as gods, spirits, souls, and other non-natural things, do not exist. So oftentimes what I find with people that take a naturalistic position is they also have an us versus them. You've probably heard about this, Doug. It's very common for people to say that if you believe in God, it's the same as believing in the Easter Bunny or fairies or
flying spaghetti monster,
Santa Claus, the flying spaghetti monster.
Well, Santa Claus is real.
It could be. Okay. I believe in fairies,
not?
but that's me. I shouldn't say that. I believe in nymphs. I don't believe in fairies. Nymphs are true. Anywho,
would that be nymphos or nymphs, as in floating?
No, a nymph. A nymph is a type of fairy, but they're larger. It's a whole thing. Don't worry about it.
Please continue.
Just don't worry about it.
I'm not.
We'll go through your an M1 word clearing session on nymph later.
I was thinking a sec check might be in order, actually.
Okay, sec check. Well, for me too. So
fair enough.
What they'll say is like God is like, they're implying that God is supernatural. So they'll say, well, you don't believe in it. I've had this conversation 5,000 times. If you talk about God, they'll assert it with the Easter Bunny or whatever. Okay, I get where they're coming from. But the thing is, I've mentioned before that God doesn't necessarily have to be a supernatural being. God can be what's called a transcendent being. And so I want to go through and just break down this dichotomy, right? We have naturalism, we have supernaturalism. Now, either one of those things could be true and one of those things could be false. What's your third option? Your third option is called transnaturalism. And transnaturalism just means that something could transcend nature, but it's not supernatural. So if you believe in a transcendent God, if you're a pantheist or a panentheist or a deist or whatever, if you generally take on that idea, then you can also come back with arguments to say, no, how let's just say, and I could say this personally, how I would view God would not be supernatural. It would be transcendent of nature. And you can kind of find a middle ground. So the reason why I made that is because when you get into those arguments with people who are associating God with fairies or whatever, they're trying to make everything part of the supernatural because they think the only opposite of that is naturalism, and it isn't. There's a middle. So that's also only the reason why I wanted to introduce this. So it could be possible that we do live in only a natural world. There are no supernatural things. But in order to break down that, we could also live in a transcendent natural world, and there could be more mature views of God rather than God being like the Easter Bunny or like fairies or the flying spaghetti monster. And to me, that again is another false dichotomy, and I'm just trying to break that down. So that's why I mentioned naturalism, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
All right, the next one here is called post-theism. So this means after theism. And this is the belief that God or gods belong to a previous stage of human development, and that the division between atheism and theism, or theism and atheism, is inherently obsolete. a lot of times people will say when we talk, because I have some brief experience of living under communism. Um, when we mention anti-theism, there were a lot of anti-theistic states that got rid of all religion. They called it state atheism, but they were really more anti-theist. Albania was one, the Soviet Union was one. When we look at Marxism,
Mm.
there's actually a very popular modern belief that Marx was actually not an atheist, but a post-theist. So when we look at different political philosophies coming out of revolutionary thinking, a lot of it is not necessarily theistic or atheistic, it's more post-theistic. And as an undergrad, I had to read Karl Marx. Okay, he's not my favorite political philosopher, doesn't really matter. He's influential regardless of my feelings. And when I was looking through some of his dealings of God and religion, the professor that I was reading from had said, instead of looking at him as an atheist, let's look at him in this perspective of him being a post-theist. And in my opinion, as someone who had communists in my family, who was, briefly in Yugoslavia, who's read a hell of a lot of Karl Marx because I kind of had to and wanted to, I felt that looking at this post-theistic perspective was actually much, much more beneficial and much better than to looking at it as, an atheist. So there are people who are post-theistic. They just say what comes after God, what should be coming after God, and it's just another viewpoint. They're not atheists, they're not theists. Again, there's some overlapping with transtheism, but the idea is we're looking afterwards. We're looking what comes next. That's all.
And not to be
The
confused
Marx
with
Brothers.
transhumanism
My
or the
favorite is Groucho, and
or
he
the
has
transgender movement, right? Yes.
no. I will say, I have a friend of mine. Whenever I mention Karl Marx, he will flash a GIF or GIF, however you're supposed to say it, of Groucho or
Right.
whatever, and I love it. I just love it. Anyway, I've read a
Yeah,
lot
me
of Karl
too.
Marx. It's anywho,
I've watched a
the
lot of
next is
Groucho
rationalism.
Marx. Yeah, I like this one. This one sounds interesting.
So
Please.
rationalism is an interesting one. Again, this gets coupled in with atheists and humanists and skeptics too. But so rationalism is any view appealing to intellectual and deductive reasons, a deductive reason rather, as the source of knowledge or justification, as opposed to sensory experience or any religious teachings. It holds that some propositions are knowable by us by intuition alone, while others are knowable by being deducted through valid argument from what does that say?
Intuitive from
Intuitive.
intuitive
Thank you.
propositions.
Exactly. Intuitive propositions. Thank you. Sometimes my vision goes a little weird when there's a bunch of eyes in a word like that.
Yeah, it's also really
So
small. I
there,
don't even know if people can see
yeah,
this. Yeah.
I apologize for that too, because it's
No, it's okay.
So the thing is this: rationalism essentially are the people, and you've probably encountered this online, where everything has to be boiled down to an argument, and if the argument is true, then it's true. And so there's these really weird push and pull, because the definition that we're reading of rationalism is the philosophy, but in a pragmatic sense, you get a lot of this, like, it has to be an argument. You have to have, we're always in a debate mode. And I kind of have been like that before, of course, because taking philosophy classes, what I found, especially as an undergrad, is not to use that, is to not always be in debate mode, is to try to have a discussion where you're sort of sharing perspectives and ideas, and you will have a much, much better time explaining your position and having people come to your position and understand your position, rather than being in debate mode all the time where, what's your argument? Tell me your argument. What's the evidence for your argument? Rationalism, I don't think it really works in good discourse. There's a place for it, but I don't really think on a one-to-one communication basis it's really that good. And a lot of times in these skeptic humanist atheist groups, you will find people who are just about the argument. And if you can't get them the good argument, then they don't want to listen to you. So it can be a little bit, in my opinion, a little bit destructive as well, because it also can be very manipulative. But
It does include intuition as a guiding force, though, does it not?
Well,
Did I read that
not
wrong?
in that sense. In the philosophy sense, yes, but in the sense of making everything into a philosophical debate, or everything into a debate, an argument, then it doesn't, because there's different sides to these issues. So I would say that rationalism, when it comes to the philosophy as written here, is the philosophical rationalism, which is a very, very good thing and has influenced science. But in today's world, there's a popular form of rationalism, which again is all about, we just have to debate everything. We can't have a conversation, and it's all about your argument. So there's those two things going on. And yeah, the definition here, this philosophical idea, it's actually very good, and it has contributed quite well to science and to philosophy as well.
Apparently, you're teaching the masses because someone had the
Yeah.
cognition, using a Scientology word, that they've learned that they are a naturalist. Where do you guys fall on all these things? I mean, I can't even begin to. So far, there hasn't been one that's when ding, 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 ding.
Right.
Mark, I got to tell you, man, I think that there's truth in all these frickin' things. You just got to
Yeah,
pick and choose. And I
course.
don't want to lay down my gauntlet on any one of these things. I don't
Agreed,
think something like the
agreed.
Bible lasts all these years if there isn't some fundamental truth in there. And yet at the same time, I'm not going to run out and subscribe to that, because there's a lot that I feel like I could pick apart too. But if you pick and
Of
choose
course.
from everything, if you see patterns and you see where the basic truths may have started, and if they last throughout time, that might be a clue to at least look at it, that there must be something there. But then again, Hubbard created all these buildings of Scientology all over the world for the last 73 years, and there's absolutely nothing there. It's completely empty. It will empty out you and your
Yeah.
wallet, and it's empty inside, even though they have big, beautiful buildings. So maybe that's totally wrong.
Yeah. Who knows?
Okay.
Yeah.
Moving right along to the next one. We covered rationalism at the bottom. Taoism. Take it away, sir.
Or Tao, also called Tao or Taoism.
That's what I said. I was just making sure
Yeah.
that you didn't go past the misunderstood there. Good, you caught that.
Thank you.
Just
I
making
appreciate it. We
sure.
don't need M1. Maybe we'll go on to M2 or M3 later.
For the listeners, we're doing Scientology gibberish. Those are the various
course.
ways that you word clear words, which were
And
absolutely drilled in Scientology.
if Alex is on here, I don't know if Apostate Alex is on here.
Yeah,
He will always say we can go through a whole day. There he is. We can go through an entire day not speaking Scientologies. The moment I see Doug's face or I see Apostate Alex come in, it comes back. It is the weirdest thing. I haven't spoken
mean?
Scientologies like this in years.
Oh, I know.
And
Comes
yet
back when I talk to him too, and you as well.
It's like a second language. It's like a second. It's like a dialect. Anywho, yeah.
I know, you make a great point. It took me forever to get rid of that and learn how to speak
God.
English, but it
I
is
know.
fun amongst exes to talk. And yeah, Dev T is one of the few terms in Scientology I've not found a suitable alternative anywhere else. Yeah. That means develop traffic. It means like all these vias that you're setting up rather than just fucking getting something done. Dev T. But Alex, isn't that the words are so corny. Tractor beams, whole track
Rock
sec
slam.
checks, children
Theta bop.
security checked, theta bop, dirty needle. It's really,
Teeny
really
weedies.
corny. Clear, operating, thetan, theories, dilettantes. That's a real word.
Anywho, so Taoism or Taoism. So this is a set of Chinese traditions and religions which emphasize living in harmony with the Dao or Tao. The Dao or Tao is generally defined as the source of everything and the ultimate principle that underlines reality. This was founded in China by Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu, who lived during the 6th century before Common Era. If anybody knows Star Wars, you know the Force. That is pretty much what the Tao is. George Lucas was heavily influenced, not just by Joseph Campbell, but he was also influenced by Taoism or Taoism. And so it's very pantheistic. And again, because there's no God, there's no deity, they teach of a spiritual force. And it is also often combined with Confucianism in China, along with Chinese forms of Buddhism, to call what's called Chinese folk religion. Many people practice Chinese folk religion. They contain elements of all these three things. And it is basically, again, it's just one of these many flavors. And there's a big debate here because if you believe in the Force, like if you're a Jedi, are Jedis atheists? Some say yes, some say no, because some will say, yes, Jedis are atheists simply because there's no God in the Jedis. But then someone will say, well, you know what? There's a spiritual force, and
the
obviously
Force
the
is kind of
Jedis
God,
live
right?
after. What I'm saying, and then also the Force, they become ghosts, so they do survive death. So again, this is one of those gray areas. where it kind of is and it kind of isn't, and no us versus them, no X versus Y is going to solve it. And so Taoism is one of those wedges that people drive through, and it's like, well, what is this? It is a religion, but it doesn't really teach of a deity God. But then again, it's a spiritual force, and we can go back and forth on this. And again, I wanted to introduce that because it is considered non-theistic, because it doesn't espouse belief in a personal God, but then there still is a spiritual force. So again, whether or not it is or isn't can be up to people as individuals, but I just think it's kind of cool. I think it's a really good, interesting discussion to sort of push to people and give them these different sides. So that's why Taoism is there. And again, if you've watched Star Wars, you kind of know at least the basics of
I thought
Taoism.
Star Wars was kind of a Gnostic religion where the Force was. We could do a whole breakdown on just Star Wars because I didn't really think it was an atheist religion. But maybe you're right. I always thought it was based on Gnosticism. And by the way, I'm with Noam. I prefer Taoism, as in the one in South Park. And by the way, it's a great point to do an intermission here, Mark, and show this very funny clip on South Park where Cynthia sent this to me. She's an ex-Mormon who's Marcus's girlfriend. And Marcus, we do the show on Fridays.
God, I love this. I love this.
So yeah, what if we, Mark, I was just thinking, what if we exit this world, we think we finally figured it out by deprogramming, and we find out that not just replace Mormon in this clip with Scientology. I'm prepared to be totally wrong. That would be the ultimate like triple face palm. Check this out.
Where am I? Where are we? Oh my God, what's happening? Hello, newcomers, and welcome. Can everybody hear me? Hello? Can everybody? Okay. I'm the Hell Director. It looks like we have about 8,000.
I'm just going to make sure to do a little pause here because these bastards are terrible about copyright. Saturday Night Live. So I just wanted to say they're in hell and all the people are gathering.
650 of you newbies today. And for those of you who were a little confused, you are dead and this is hell. So abandon all hope and yada, yada, yada. We're now going to start the orientation process, which will last about...
Hey, wait a minute. I shouldn't be here. I was a totally strict and devout Protestant. I thought we went to heaven.
No, they were just random pause, just so we don't get copyright.
Yes, well, I'm afraid you were wrong.
I was a practicing Jehovah's Witness.
You picked the wrong religion as well.
Well, who was right? Who gets into heaven?
I'm afraid it was the Mormons. Yes, the Mormons were the correct answer.
Oh.
So now I'd like to quickly introduce your new ruler and master for eternity, Satan.
Okay, that's enough as we can get away with.
I love it. The Mormons,
isn't that just a classic?
The Mormons. Oh my God.
Listen,
I used to have my late great friend Gary Scarf. He used to love that clip.
Oh,
and he used to
really?
say all the times. He would say the Mormons, the Mormons. That was like a thing he used to say a lot. So anyway, good sentimental little memory there.
I'm thinking it's either going to be the Mormons or Scientologists that had it right in the afterlife, just to really spin my reality around, as if this world hasn't been weird enough so far.
Exactly. Jeez.
Okay, we're almost done.
Do you remember?
Oh, hey, I'm willing for that. Yeah, I do. I'm willing for it to be Eckankar.
All right, so we're almost done.
I don't think it's Mormons, though. Okay, so did we cover this one, Mark?
So the next one is Theravada Buddhism. So Theravada Buddhism is one of the two largest schools of Buddhism, and it's the oldest denomination. It points to no creator gods. It flat out rejects the idea of a creator gods, and it believes that what are called devas or devas, which could be called gods in other traditions. The devas are actually beings that live in different realms and possibly different dimensions, but these higher beings are mortal, so that means they will eventually die. They're imperfect, and they're not even important for an individual to gain enlightenment, And this particular school of Buddhism is popular in Thailand, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Cambodia, and Laos. So Buddhism is often considered a non-theistic religion, and in particular, Theravada Buddhism. Again, they have these higher beings in different realms, but they're not worshipped. They're in some ways corrupt, and they're basically like just humans. I mean, they're just in another realm. And so that is also considered to be a non-theistic religion, because they do not espouse belief in a personal God. They do not espouse belief in a creator, yet they're still considered a religion. So just God itself is not the be all and end all of religion. Religion is not even, there's not even really a definition of religion that can define all religions. It's kind of when we see it, we know it. And there are many religions within religions, and it's very complicated. And so Theravada Buddhism is one of those things where people say, well, there are many gods, but they're not really gods because they're imperfect, immortal. They also die. This is the one thing where when the Buddha was meditating under the Bodhi tree, the story goes that when he went up to these different realms spiritually, the devas, these higher beings, they can die and be reincarnated as lower beings as well. So even these higher beings in different dimensions are on the same plane of existence as us when it comes to reincarnation and suffering and so forth. So that throws another thing into the wheel of religion, because for most of us, religion is worship of this one big, gigantic,
Right.
supernatural being. But imagine if there's multiple,
As if it wasn't complex and hard enough to
human-like.
figure out. in
Exactly,
itself.
exactly.
That's
So that's
interesting, though.
Theravada Buddhism,
Very interesting.
and it's pretty cool. Yeah. So the last one is going to be, there's going to be 4 here, and we can just do this.
Sure.
The
Rapid fire
next
with
one
it.
here. So these are some other views because I had forgotten to put them into the one before. Some people have probably heard of objectivism. And
Yep.
objectivism is the view that there is a reality or realm of objects and facts which exist wholly independently of the mind. Thus, objectivism holds that there is only one correct description of reality, whether we have any knowledge of it or not. Now, a lot of people might also know objectivism because it's a philosophy. Although it started in the Greek times, in modern times, it's associated with the author Ayn Rand. And what they basically believe, I personally don't like Ayn Rand, and this is a couple. Oh, hi, is it Urma Web or
Uma
Urma
Web.
Web? Hi, how are you?
Yes.
So
And
I
by the way, Mark, I
particularly
need to
don't like-
interject real quick. J Dice, we will get
course,
to
of
the
course.
questions at the end. He's almost done, and then I got
course,
I
I'm
got some
almost done.
starred, but
So-
I'm not sure if that's a real question or not.
Objectivists, okay, believe in something that I highly disagree with, which is that there is one objective morality and one objective reality, and it can only be known through reason and free market capitalist political ideology. And I think that literally that is subjective, not because I'm not hardcore left wing, I'm not hardcore right wing. When it comes to economics, whatever. But I just don't think that there is one ism that explains all of reality. But an objectivist would say that our subjective realities and our subjective feelings don't even matter, because there is only one objective reality. I've mentioned the term before with you guys in my previous things. I believe in pluralism. Pluralism means that there are multiple descriptions of reality. And this, of course, goes against that. They say there's only one. So that is also considered, especially Ayn Randian objectivism. Everyone from themselves. There's a lot going on there, believe me.
Yeah, we could
Virtues of
do a whole thing on Ayn
selfishness.
Rand. What was that? The Fountainhead that I remember seeing that movie, man. I was like
Atlas Shrugged.
blown away by that. I
Yeah.
was like, hell yeah, this guy's standing up for his freaking principles and taking on the system that
That's
wants to
right.
crush his ass, all because he's a freaking artist or whatever. But apparently, there's more behind the Ayn Rand philosophy and such.
There's
I
a
thought
lot
the
more.
movie
Now,
was fucking awesome. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's objectivism. There's only one objective morality, one objective, I think it's a very fundamentalist position. Now we're going to get into skepticism, okay?
Okay.
So there's 2 versions of skepticism. Philosophical, and in the next slide we're going to talk about scientific. So philosophical skepticism is the view, and this kind of overlaps with strong agnosticism. It's the view that questions the possibility of knowledge. Philosophical skeptics are classified into 2 categories: those who do not deny all possibilities of knowledge, and those who advocate for the suspension of judgment due to the inadequacy of evidence. So if you have ever come across a person who just says, we can't know anything, we cannot know anything at all, they're a philosophical skeptic. They normally are not a part of scientific skepticism, which are the skeptics groups. So a philosophical skeptic just says, how do you know that's true? You can't know that's true because there's just so many bigger things going on. you can't really know anything, not even subjectively, not objectively. Knowledge just doesn't exist. Okay, it's a little radical of a position. Again, it can be the extreme form of agnosticism, and philosophical skepticism was often associated with those aforementioned people like Thomas Huxley, Robert Ingersoll, Charles Darwin. They kind of had the idea that nothing could ever be known, essentially, nothing at all. Okay, so that's
Nothing
what
at all.
philosophical is.
I mean, surely in order to go
Pretty
forward,
much.
you have to have some belief system about something. So you have to have some basic foundation in order to move
Exactly.
forward. You can't think nothing. So what do you mean exactly by they didn't believe anything?
Well, it's
Was
not that they
are we
didn't
talking
believe in
about the
anything.
apophatic process where you negate everything until you're left
That's
with
it.
there's a religious
That's right.
connotation. But,
So
okay.
if somebody says like, okay, I know something to be true, you would be skeptical of that claim. So you would want them to provide evidence, and then you would try to suss it out until they could admit that they don't know.
Really? And they don't believe anything? They can they
It's
think
not
they
that
can
they don't
take anything
believe,
apart that way?
it's not that they don't necessarily believe in anything. That's more like nihilism, and I didn't want to include like existentialism
know
or
what that is.
nihilism because that's
Sure.
a whole thing.
Sure.
That's a whole thing. But it's more like doubting claims of knowledge. So when somebody says that they know something, you kind of doubt that claim, and you try to kind of suss it out. It's kind of old school. It's not really used too much anymore because, of course, people can't know things because of subjective experience and learning, which is the small t truth, which is subjectiveness and learning. And we do have science to help us with the big T truth, which is simply objective empirical stuff. Like we can know certain things objectively, we can know them subjectively, and so forth. So it doesn't really work in today's world, but going through when the scientific method was being discovered, this was like the most radical end of science. It was like, let's just assume we don't know anything and can't know anything until we can try to get the knowledge into us and so and suss it out or whatever. So it's a gone by kind of thing, essentially.
Very, very interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to know something, I think, that,
Yeah.
It's interesting that these are the non-theistic views that we covered in contrast to part one, which covered theism. And I noticed a significant lack of intuition being a valid perception, feelings, faith, things that are outside of the five senses, what we might call science. That was one of the things that always blew my fucking mind, Mark, when I was in school growing up, is why are the arts and the things that can be intuited and bring deep joy and maybe wisdom not taught so much? And why is all the left brain boring shit taught to me? Maybe I would have been diagnosed with like something in school if I was like whatever, like, because I could never pay attention or focus because it's mostly boring. But when I study on my own, knowledge itself is fascinating. It's just the shit that I was taught was just boring as fuck. Not to mention, you don't even learn how to balance a checkbook, think critically, or learn anything about narcissists, sociopaths, or true, history. So a lot of that was just, it wasn't that knowledge was shitty. It was the information was not correct. Well, after all that confusion, folks, head down to okay, this is great. For those looking to join Scientology, Elron was kind enough to offer 50% off free personality. And in the last, you guys.
So that means that, hold on, just 1 second, 1 second. If it's 50% off free, that means they're giving me money.
I think Hubbard is way ahead of the game, Mark, and he's doing a Jedi mind trick, not to be confused with Jedi religion. By the way, the early bird gets the worm because you never know when Hubbard's going to dip in with the discounts. Last stream, he offered 50% off auditing, and since auditing currently goes for $105,000 an hour. I think that would bring it down to $55,000 an hour. So thank you for that, Hubbard. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Hubbard. Very, very.
I'll drop a link in the description on where to sign up for that, or just go to Scientology.org. We're kidding, right? I could just see somebody taking a clip out of this, going, "See, I knew he was a closet Scientologist." Okay, I think we got to the end.
All right,
Mark,
last one. We're in the last one. Yeah.
Oh, okay. We're not to the very last one. That's a surprise.
We have. Yeah, well, we're getting there. So scientific skepticism, again, when we talk about groups like the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry. There's something called Skeptical Inquirer Magazine. There's also the Skeptic Society. This is what they mean. So this is their position. So scientific skepticism is a position in which one questions the veracity of claims lacking empirical evidence. In practice, the term most commonly references the examination of claims that and theories that appear to be beyond mainstream science rather than the routine discussions and challengings among scientists. This is a very good thing because it's separating actual science from scientific skepticism. Now, there are many people that are scientists that are also scientific skeptics, but as I've said before, you go to most of these skeptic communities or whatever, and I'd say over at least 80, 90% are not scientists. So what they do is they apply some loosely sort of basic scientific concepts to essentially claims on alternative medicine, on the supernatural, on all this kind of stuff. So they debunk psychics, they debunk homeopathy, electromagnet therapies, Reiki, ESP, and a lot of it they have debunked on what we know, for example, on Scientology. It's easily to debunk, for example, the Purif and the e-meter and whatnot. So I would say that there's definitely some value in these groups, but they're not doing science. They have this philosophical position, scientific skepticism position, and they're not scientists doing science. And I think a lot of people get into this almost as lay people, thinking that they're like elevating their own position in their own life by becoming kind of like scientists, or they're opening the door so they can kind of do scientific inquiry without actually having a degree. And I think that right there is really troubling, because a lot of people who are online or who go to these they're called investigations, kind of think that they're scientists. And that's called LARPing. I don't know if you've ever heard of that term. They LARP as scientists.
Yes.
Essentially,
yes.
LARPing is role playing. They're kind of like role playing as scientists, but they're not scientists. And most scientists don't care. Like, if you're working in the health field and you're a good biologist, science, that certain alternative medicines just don't work, and they just put it behind them and they work on other stuff. But these skeptics are like really, really into debunking these things over and over and over and over. So there's value in it, but again, to me, there's a lot of misinformation, at least some misinformation, especially with people thinking that they now understand science more, or that they're somehow involved in science. Unfortunately, they're not. They're involved in scientific skepticism, which is a different kettle of fish.
So I didn't find any of those that I would espouse to. That was a very interesting discussion. I really like the theist one more, because not the presentation, Mark, just what I would personally lean towards, because there were so many more options, and this one was just like not my cup of tea, but for other people it is, right?
Exactly.
Like, it's just, what do you believe?
Experience,
and also,
it's
I was just going to say that it has to do with experience too. What you grow up in, what were your parents' beliefs, what are the societal beliefs? And then again, I think subjective experience, even though you can never prove it and hold it to somebody, I don't think that could be underestimated as
that's
to
another
a way to learn. There's Tom Cruise, by the way, to finish off the.
I wanted to also say.
By the way, Mark, what if we go to hell and we find out it's not Mormon or any of them? It's actually Tom Cruise that was right. No, Tom Cruise himself.
Okay,
and then he'll form a religion.
He's God,
yeah.
Well, the one thing I do want to say
in his mind.
The one thing I want to say is, when you sometimes read these books by new atheists, Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, they downplay personal experience. And I think that is so toxic. They will say that God doesn't exist and it doesn't matter about your personal experience. If you read The God Delusion, that book is all about personal experiences.
I have read that.
It's all about his own personal experience. You can't.
And everybody has to have a personal experience. I know. He almost kind of lost me right off.
It's how we learn. Exactly. It's how we learn. It's how we're in this world. It has to mean something. It cannot be objective. We can't cross that line. But if we know where the line is, fine. And that's all it is. And this is why I said, in my own opinion, like pluralism, because it says we can have two conflicting truths at the same time because there's more than one definition of reality, that there's multiple sources towards the truth, and things that are subjective and objective matter. They both matter. They're both part of the truth. So anyone who tries to denigrate, again, with your own personal experience, they're telling you that based on their own personal experience. Very ironic.
Because we all
And
have
that's
to
all.
have personal experiences. You can't go through
I know.
without feeling, and well, unless you're a psychopath, you can. Which sometimes I'm
And
like,
some
God damn it,
some people are.
why couldn't I have been that 2%er with no conscience? I could take over the world. That'd be a piece of cake. Because most people with a conscience cannot do the scale of evil that, like Hubbard, you know,
Yep.
that was one of the hardest things to suss him. Is like nobody could be that evil or lie on that scale. And we were talking about this before, Mark, about the confidence man. It has the word confidence in it. And Hubbard was so bold and bald-faced with the claims. He was such a confident man. KSW, keeping Scientology working. Like these policies were said with such certainty that it almost put me under a spell because I've never heard somebody be that confident before. Guys, if you have any questions before we roll out of here, because that was an excellent presentation. We got it right in 2 hours. And I did star some questions/comments. If you have anything, just put question in bold before we roll out of here and we'll answer anything. But it's a lot of good people talking amongst themselves, but not
Thank
a
you,
heck
guys.
of a lot.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Okay to talk
for chatting amongst
Go ahead.
yourselves. No, that's what they can do whatever they want. I mean, it's actually more. It was very fascinating. The Royals are a cult, no? I would say, yeah. I mean, we are.
In some ways.
It's just like, look at how modern the world is, and we still have a group of people that are determined to rule over their area. It's not, it's the Queen of England's establishment. It's not the people's. And here we are, you know, with these people just like ruling over us, depending on who fucked who and who, over when. And it's just the whole royal thing is just absurd in my
well, now it's the king. Now it's King Charles, and King Charles, like Queen Elizabeth before, is and
the people are like cheering and like, yay, please take all our money and our taxes and rule over us. And when you contribute nothing to society, it's
exactly. But they're still the head of state in dozens of countries, incling Canada. Canada does not have its own elected head of state.
I know.
It's the King and Queen of England.
Great point. And how they've extended
ridiculous.
out. It's unbelievable.
Yeah,
and yet there's a Stockholm syndrome with people, you know, rawing and cheering them. And I mean, these people get televised every year. They're the most. Yeah. I'm telling you, we are ruled over by the least among us. Okay, that's just wanted to remind people of Hubbard's giving 50% off. And again, we played that South Park clip earlier. Maybe Scientology it really is. We'll all get, you know, quadruple facepalm when we rise into hell and find out Satan was like, yes, it was Scientology. Which philosophy would the street epistemologist lean towards?
Oh God,
he beats to his own drummer.
I don't like street epistemology. I love trolling them. They're
hell yeah,
hilarious. Anywho, rationalists. They're rationalists. And rationalism crumbles with a lot of good philosophical underpinnings, just like every other philosophy. So don't worry about it.
Jay Dice, listen, we want all the questions coming in that we possibly can. And true, I did announce that a long time ago, but there wasn't any questions coming in. I tried to interrupt Mark for the ones that did pop up. So if you have anything, please feel free to pop it down there. I'm totally just gonna make fun of you here, Jay Dice. This isn't really you, but I love all the interesting info. So I'm not complaining or anything. But remember when he said we get to the questions soon? It was like 2:20. Second episode is probably like second or third, really. If you're not complaining, Jay Dice, then ask us a question. We are more than willing to appease. It's good to see you again, by the way.
That's no worries. Yeah.
Let me see if we got any more. Jay Dice again. Okay. I take back everything I just said. Apologies for making fun of you. We have a real question here. I've read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. What does that make me? See, Jay Dice, that's not a real question.
No, it's
Hubbard,
okay.
will you take Hubbard and/or Goldie
I've read
or Alex?
I've read it, and it's probably somewhere in. I mean, it is.
Is this a real thing?
But yeah,
I must be totally retarded. I thought she was being sarcastic.
No, it's a book.
So,
it's a book.
Can you explain?
I read it a long time ago.
Is it literally about motorcycle maintenance? working on your motorcycle and going into Zen mode? Is that what we're talking about?
No,
here?
it's a fictional book about a
Oh,
gentleman,
really?
I think, who goes on like a motorcycle trip and then learns about life and stuff. So
Oh,
it's like a
cool.
little Buddhisty, it's a little
Sounds
new
awesome.
agey, it's a little that kind of stuff. It's kind of a mix of stuff.
It's not
There's a lot of
nonfiction, or is
spirituality.
it? Is it
It's
nonfiction, or
fiction.
is it?
It's fiction. It's
Okay.
a novel, I believe.
That
I
sounds
believe. Yeah,
really
no, it is a novel.
interesting.
Yeah, it's actually not too bad. I would recommend reading it. It's very popular and it's actually quite a good book. I enjoyed it. So I read
Jay
it as
Dice,
like
thank you
18,
so
19
much
years
for
old.
that.
Yeah.
Definitely check that out. Let's see. Mark, we should do a whole thing on the Jedi Church. I have quite an interesting
Sure.
story to tell about it. I've not shared
Nice.
publicly.
We'll
Is this
do
the
it.
part
We'll
when
do
you
it.
dressed up as Darth Vader, Alex, when you were trying to come on to Luke Skywalker? Or am I thinking about something different? You go ahead and discuss that with Mark.
Good
Okay,
with that.
guys. Huh?
More Jedis in the UK than there are Scientologists, as per the census, by the way.
I know. And I think even Satanism was a more popular religion than Scientology, wasn't
That's
it?
right. Yeah. And so is Rastafarianism, Ekankar.
Well, that was one I would definitely want to join with Ekankar.
Rastafarianism. Oh yeah.
Okay, my friends. It doesn't look like there's any other
Okay, that's cool.
questions.
Now
Jedi, now we're
Jedi,
talking.
yeah.
Hell yeah. Either that, Hands, or somebody I heard of, you guys know I have the dude poster in the back here. I
Yeah,
don't have
great
an
movie.
obsession with this, but isn't there a Big Lebowski cult you can join or something?
Yeah,
In fact, Mark,
it's called
somebody
Dudeism.
being it. There
Dudeism.
you go. And by the way, when
I love
somebody
that movie. I
accused me
would
of
join
like
that cult.
hypnotizing them and putting him in the Dudeism
would
cult
join
when
it.
I first started doing
Yeah.
the videos. And then I looked it up because I didn't know it was a thing. And I was like, fuck yeah, I would
Dudeism.
join that. Smoke weed all day and just like
Sit in
love
your
and peace.
cardigan,
Yeah.
in your
Yeah,
bathrobe,
exactly.
talk about the rug
That's-
that really tied
That
the
is
room together. Oh,
such
I
a
love that
fucking
movie.
great movie.
Yeah,
Friends,
The Nihilists. We don't
yeah.
believe in
The
nothing.
Nihilist. Obviously,
from the Red Hot Chili
you're
Peppers.
not a golfer. Oh, everything
Yeah.
about that movie ruled. The casting, the script, just
When
amazing.
when John Goodman is yelling about Shomer Shabbos, I don't bowl on
Oh,
Friday.
yeah.
It's Shomer Shabbos. Oh my God! You converted. You're a Polish Catholic, but I don't bowl. You're divorced
Dude,
now.
John
but I don't
Goodman
bowl on Friday.
ripped the ass out of that role. You couldn't play a
Oh my
Vietnam vet with PTSD any better than him. I
Oh
mean, he
my
was
God.
freaking hysterical.
God. The
I love that
Jesus.
movie.
Oh my Lord, I love
Oh,
it.
yeah.
I love that movie so much. Yeah. Don't
And on
mess with the
paper, that would
Jesus.
look like complete dog shit. It would look like, what gibberish did you send this? But on film, it was fucking
Oh.
awesome. Guys, real quick, I want to let you know what's coming up. So possibly coming up this week. Possibly tomorrow, Steve Mango will be coming on. We haven't said it for sure, but if he's
Wow.
able to make it. Yeah, he hasn't been on
Great.
YouTube forever, and we've been
That's right.
trying to get a
yeah.
live going here, but we have 7 p.m. tomorrow tentatively scheduled. If he can't make it or I can't make it, I'm sure he'll be on soon. But if so, I'll put up a
Great.
link tomorrow, and we will be streaming on both channels. Thursday, we have Thursdays at 2 with Apostate Alex, who keeps hitting on me in the chat, and I just keep trying to ignore it. We're going from bromance to no-mance, my friend. I'm just joking.
Out to
Thursdays
the-
at 2. Yeah, I know. We don't want to give anybody MUs before we roll out of here. Fridays is
I do.
Backflash Friday with Marcus Sawyer. We're going to be doing part 4 of his story. Please catch up on the previous 3 parts, because that's been a amazing story with him. And I think that's it. That's it. There's some other stuff coming up, and I'm trying to play catch up on getting all the videos up from the original channel, but there's backlog of guests. We have some interesting directions I think we're going to be going into. As you know, we don't just cover Scientology. That's a main theme, but there's many other areas to branch off from. Friends, thanks for joining us. It was good to see familiar faces, and until the next time, take care.
Now here is L. Ron Hubbard.
And you find in each and every case, you're finding the phenomenon of entities, communications, spaceships, other planets, locations, beingness in other states, and all of this, and you find this to be a consistent condition, you have fulfilled this definition of the mesh universe.